She lashed out with a venomous tongue, her face contorted in a snarl as she demanded to know why he was wasting time with such insignificant foes. Her anger was palpable, a sharp contrast to the composed image she usually projected. Continuing her tirade, she mocked his lack of talent, claiming that his head would have been crushed if not for her timely intervention. He simply looked down, absorbing the verbal blows in a silence that suggested this was a routine occurrence. While she maintained this cruel facade in private, the rest of the party saw only a paragon of strength, marveling at how she had effortlessly cleaved a monstrous beast in two with a single strike. To them, her power was absolute and awe-inspiring. To the world, the title of hero was a sacred distinction held by only 7 individuals, and she stood at the very pinnacle as the youngest to ever receive the honor. Her name was whispered in hushed tones of reverence by the masses. Her companions spoke of her with nothing but adoration, praising her beautiful soul and the way she supposedly fretted over the well-being of someone as unreliable as her childhood friend. They were completely enamored by the saintly mask she wore. Deep within the woods, the trio waited for their leader to return, convinced she was currently tending to the wounds she claimed he had sustained in the skirmish. They remained oblivious to the reality of the situation unfolding just out of sight. He stared ahead with a hollow gaze, fully aware of the deception. She had the entire world fooled by her public persona, leaving him as the only witness to her true, jagged nature. She loomed over him, her expression cold and demanding, ordering him to hurry up and apologize so they could return to the others without raising suspicion. He knelt before her, a silent victim of the hero's hidden malice. Looking back, things hadn't always been this way. There was a time when the group shared genuine smiles and a sense of true camaraderie, long before the shadows of status began to warp their bond. The shift had been gradual but absolute, beginning the very moment she was chosen to bear the weight and the prestige of the hero's mantle. The girl he once knew was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating icon. She watched, her gaze narrowing as the last vestiges of patience began to erode, bit by agonizing bit. Her laughter was sharp and mocking as she looked down, dismissing him as utterly useless. He tried to tell himself she was merely venting the pressures of her role, but the weight of her disdain was becoming impossible to ignore. The cruelty in her voice reached a new peak when she questioned if his only remaining purpose was to serve as her shield and die in her stead. The words struck him with a cold, hollow finality. She loomed over him, demanding he press his forehead into the dirt in a display of absolute submission. When he began to rise instead of obeying, her confusion quickly turned back into a sharp, demanding interrogation. He stood tall, meeting her gaze with a newfound clarity as he declared that he would no longer follow her commands. The simple, firm no hung in the air, shattering the dynamic they had maintained for so long. Her face contorted with a sudden, violent rage, veins bulging as she screamed at him for daring to talk back. She issued a final ultimatum: total obedience or immediate expulsion from the hero's party, but he had already begun to turn his back on her. He remained unmoved by her threats, calmly informing her that she could handle the quest report herself. Since she had already threatened to kick him out, he decided to make the choice for her, stating that her demands were no longer his concern. As he walked away into the shadows of the forest, she reached out, her voice cracking as she desperately commanded him to wait. The power she once held over him had vanished with his every step. He realized then that he could no longer endure the charade. He had intentionally faltered against a minor foe just to see her true colors, and the ugliness he witnessed confirmed his darkest fears. Standing before the Adventurers Guild, he whispered a final farewell to the memory of the girl he once knew. The Letitia who had been his friend was gone, replaced by a stranger he could no longer follow. He stands before the guild counter, his expression weary as the receptionist's face contorts in pure disbelief. She can't fathom why he would leave the hero's party after 5 long years, her voice rising in a mix of shock and confusion at his sudden resignation from such a prestigious group. Despite her protests, he remains firm, asking if there are any requests available for a solo adventurer. The receptionist, still reeling from the news, frantically searches through her documents while he waits in silence, eventually thanking her as she begins to process his request for independent work. As he walks away from the counter, his thoughts drift back to the woman he left behind, rationalizing that this separation is for the best. He reflects on how her true nature had been surfacing more frequently of late, making the eventual split feel almost inevitable despite their long history together. A heavy sigh escapes him as he stares downward, the weight of his newfound freedom clashing with a lingering, unwanted concern for her well-being. He curses himself for still worrying about someone who treated him so poorly, even now that he is finally out from under her shadow. His moment of reflection is cut short when the receptionist delivers the grim news. There are absolutely no quests available for a single person at the moment. Panic begins to set in as he realizes his dire financial situation, his mind racing for a solution to his sudden lack of income and resources. Just as despair begins to take hold, a young woman with a bright smile approaches, introducing herself as Alice Sprite. She explains that she is also currently without a party and asks if they might be able to talk, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to his own somber mood. They move to a nearby table, where she directly asks if he would be willing to form a party with her so they can take on better quests. He hesitates, looking away as he warns her that he is incredibly weak and would likely only cause problems for her in the field, despite her optimistic offer. She looks at him with a mixture of confusion and skepticism, pointing out the absurdity of his claim given his history with the hero's party. He tries to explain his actual role, admitting with a sheepish expression that he was essentially just the group's chore boy rather than a combatant. To prove his point, he pulls out his adventurer's card and presents it to her, the official document confirming his status. The card clearly lists him as a level 7 wizard, a shockingly low rank for someone who walked alongside the realm's greatest heroes for half a decade. Her eyes widen in genuine shock as she compares his meager level to the legendary strength of the hero, who she knows to be level 55. The massive gap in their abilities leaves her momentarily speechless, struggling to reconcile the man before her with the prestigious group he once belonged to. She brushes off his concerns about money with a bright, infectious smile, insisting that they should simply try accepting a quest as a pair. Despite his confusion and the weight of his own low level, she remains undeterred, dragging him toward a new venture. Soon after, the duo finds themselves deep within a dark forest, encircled by a pack of snarling, predatory wolves. While she stands her ground with a hand on her hilt, he remains close behind, observing the beasts as they close in. The creatures are ferocious, their maws agape to reveal rows of jagged teeth as they let out guttural growls. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the imminent threat of the hunt. With a sharp intake of breath, the young woman draws her blade, her playful demeanor replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a seasoned combatant. The steel catches the dim light of the forest as she prepares to strike. The skirmish erupts into a blur of motion as she lunges forward, her blade finding its mark against the first of the beasts. He moves in perfect synchronization, providing the necessary opening for her to land a decisive blow, earning a quick word of praise from his new partner. She continues her assault with a rapid technique, her sword moving with blinding speed to keep the pack at bay. Meanwhile, he handles his own side of the fray with quiet efficiency, ensuring that no wolf manages to flank them. Delivering a final, powerful twin strike, she carves through the last of their attackers, leaving the forest floor silent once more. She exhales a long breath of relief, counting the fallen monsters and confirming that the subjugation of the local threat is complete. Turning back toward her companion, her face lights up with genuine admiration as she declares how incredible his performance was. He can only stare back in stunned silence, caught off guard by such unbridled positivity. She continues to gush over his abilities, marveling at how he provided expert support and transitioned to swordplay so seamlessly despite his classification as a wizard. The praise is relentless, leaving him visibly flustered and unsure of how to respond to such high regard. This warmth stands in stark contrast to his memories of the hero, who used to berate him for overstepping and stealing the glory of her achievements. As she continues to celebrate their victory, he realizes that while he is used to being undervalued, this new partnership offers a perspective he never expected. He stood hunched over, his body trembling from the unfamiliar weight of genuine praise. Sensing his distress, Alice leaned in, her voice laced with concern as she asked what was troubling him. He admitted that his heart had suddenly squeezed, a visceral reaction to her kindness that he struggled to process. This revelation sent her into a panic. She immediately closed the distance, grabbing his shoulders and peering into his face with wide, frantic eyes, demanding to know if he was falling ill. Caught off guard by her sudden proximity and the intensity of her worry, he stammered out a reassurance, trying to explain that it wasn't a medical emergency. They stand frozen as a massive, white-furred beast looms over them, its predatory gaze fixed on its prey. Alice's breath hitches in terror, her eyes wide as she realizes the sheer scale of the threat. She reacts instinctively as the creature lunges with a ferocious snap of its jaws, shoving her companion aside to take the brunt of the assault. She screams for him to run, her voice cracking with desperation as the wolf's shadow engulfs her. She watches in horror as the beast, a rare and deadly king wolf, snarls, its presence in this area a terrifying anomaly. She trembles, realizing that fleeing is no longer an option. The predator is too fast, and they are trapped in its territory. Resigned to a grim fate, she decides to buy him enough time to escape, even if it costs her life. She blames herself for dragging him into this danger, her heart heavy with the weight of her perceived responsibility. She is stunned to find that he remains inexplicably calm, questioning her panic and dismissing the creature as a mere parent of the lesser wolves they had encountered. She stares at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend his lack of fear in the face of certain death. Ignoring her frantic pleas to retreat, the young man steps forward to face the towering monster. He seems genuinely confused by her reaction, asking if she has truly never encountered such a common sight before. Despite her warnings about his low level, with a single, whispered command, he unleashes a torrent of flame that erupts with the force of a volcanic blast. The searing heat consumes the king wolf instantly, turning the apex predator into a pillar of fire. The massive threat is reduced to a pile of smoldering ash in seconds, leaving nothing but a notification of a completed subjugation. She watches, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of the power she just witnessed. She begins to spiral into a state of shock, her mind racing to reconcile his beginner magic with the total annihilation of a high-level monster. He simply shrugs it off, insisting it was a basic spell, while she struggles to find words for the absurdity of the situation. She finally manages to explain the gravity of the situation, noting that the creature was a level 30 king wolf, a foe neither of them should have survived. He listens with a blank expression, seemingly unaware that he has just performed a feat that defies all logic. She continues to berate him, unable to fathom his nonchalance. She explains that the creature wasn't a mere level 5 chump, but a king wolf, a parent to the pack. She demands to know why he's so pleased with himself for defeating such a high-level threat with what he calls a beginner spell. This reminds him of a time with Letitia. She had laughed, calling him a child for his excitement over learning basic fire magic. She'd teased that even children could master such simple spells, urging him to keep his pride in check and never tell anyone about his embarrassing enthusiasm. He reflects on her status as the hero, a figure of universal admiration and a truly exceptional adventurer. It occurs to him that she might have been entirely unaware of the disparity in their abilities, leading her to believe his feats were common. Clenching his fist, he realizes that despite the harshness of her treatment, he had taken every word she said as absolute truth. Her perspective had become his reality, shaping his distorted view of his own power. Returning to the present, he notices her injury and immediately casts a healing spell. The light of the magic surprises her, and she stares at her mended skin in disbelief as the pain vanishes instantly. She erupts in confusion, pointing out that healing magic is strictly reserved for the priest classes. She demands an explanation for how a wizard like him could possibly perform such a feat. He simply shrugs, claiming it's just another beginner-level spell he picked up. The revelation leaves her reeling, her understanding of the world's rules crumbling. He remains oblivious to her distress, insisting that for a wizard, such magic should be trivial, further upsetting her sense of logic. Desperate for answers, she grabs him and demands to see his adventurer's card once more. She is certain there must be some error or hidden detail she missed that explains his impossible capabilities. He produces the official guild card, confirming its authenticity. When she asks when it was last updated, he casually mentions it hasn't been touched since it was issued 5 years ago, when he first became an adventurer. She is struck by a new wave of horror at the realization that his registered level is half a decade out of date. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she insists they return to the guild immediately to rectify the oversight and find out his true standing. She hands over the renewal fee at the guild counter, ignoring his visible distress over the cost. The receptionist prepares to process the long-overdue update, noting the unusual length of time since the last registration. Seeing his shock, she apologizes for the high price but remains firm in her decision. She admits that his ability to heal and defeat powerful monsters like king wolves makes him an enigma she can't quite grasp, making the update even more vital. He continues to grumble about her persistence and the waste of funds, but she counters that the money is his rightful share from their recent quest. She insists this step is necessary for his own benefit, regardless of his protests. Her tone softens as she looks at him, reminding him that he is the person who saved her life. She expresses a deep desire to repay that debt, suggesting a level of devotion that leaves him utterly flustered and speechless. The tension breaks into a moment of shared, light-hearted laughter between the two. The weight of their recent trials seems to lift as they enjoy a rare moment of genuine connection. He finds himself smiling, struck by a rare sense of warmth and comfort while by her side. She notices his expression and teases him for being so serious, though her eyes remain kind and welcoming. They share a quiet, peaceful moment, a stark contrast to the chaos of their usual lives. He reflects on how many years it has been since he felt such genuine tranquility, before a sudden thought regarding the guild's rules occurs to him. Their conversation shifts back to the practicalities of their profession, with her explaining that the card is their only official identification. Without a properly updated record of his strength, they would be barred from accepting higher-level quests and face constant bureaucratic hurdles. This reminder triggers a bitter memory of being mocked by former companions who called him talentless. They had laughed at the idea of him wasting money on a renewal, convinced he would never amount to anything more than a burden. Returning to the present, she is aghast to learn he hasn't updated his status in 5 years, a task required every 6 months. He sheepishly tries to justify the neglect, claiming he was too busy with menial chores to bother with the formalities of the guild. He absorbs the information with a quiet, contemplative murmur, his gaze fixed on something unseen as he processes the weight of the situation. As the hero walks away, her thoughts linger on the simple freedoms she was denied, while back at the counter, the young woman hands over the identification card. The receptionist confirms the completion of the process, prompting a confused inquiry about the warrior's unexpected level of involvement and why she would go to such lengths for a simple renewal. The guild worker's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the updated information flickers into view on the card's surface. The title of Sage is emblazoned clearly, accompanied by a staggering level of 82, a revelation that defies all expectations for a man previously dismissed as a mere traitor. Trembling with a cold sweat, she struggles to reconcile these numbers, knowing full well that even the legendary hero only stands at level 55. The realization that this individual possesses power far eclipsing the realm's greatest champion leaves her breathless and questioning everything she thought she knew about his capabilities. He remains silent, his head bowed as the weight of the Sage title, a rare and prestigious class reserved for the elite few, hangs in the air. Alice, meanwhile, is lost in a whirlwind of logic, trying to grasp the impossible reality that her companion might actually be significantly more powerful than the champion herself. While the hero continues her departure, unaware of the shockwave she left behind, the man at the center of the revelation is equally bewildered. He stares into the distance, his mind racing with confusion as he realizes he has no memory of attaining such a legendary status, let alone surpassing the strength of the woman he once followed. Inside the bustling guild hall, the receptionist reviews the latest records, her voice filled with a mix of awe and disbelief as she notes that the man known as the hero is a level 82 sage. Haru stands nearby, listening intently as the weight of this information begins to sink in, his expression clouded by a growing sense of unease. Building on the receptionist's revelation, Alice explains that sages are unparalleled experts in the arcane, capable of wielding devastating attack spells, potent healing, and versatile support magic. She admits that this explains how he was able to use restorative magic, yet a lingering doubt remains in her eyes as she considers the sheer scale of his abilities. As she speaks, the young woman turns her gaze toward her companion, noticing his sudden withdrawal into silence. She questions if he is truly all right. Unable to reconcile the logic of levels with the terrifying, raw power of the fire magic she witnessed him unleash during their battle. Despite her words, he remains trapped within the shadows of his own mind, the single, agonizing question of why echoing through his thoughts as the painful memories of his past begin to resurface with a vengeance. This internal turmoil triggers a bitter memory of the hero, who had once stood before Letitia with an air of insufferable arrogance. The man had accused the Sword Princess of lying to him, claiming she must have known all along that he was a special existence destined for greatness. In this vision of the past, Haru stands frozen as the hero's cruel words cut through him like a blade. The realization that his years of service and suffering were dismissed as nothing more than stress relief for a superior being leaves him reeling with a sense of profound betrayal. The memory sharpens as the man with glasses reveals his true, twisted motivation, his face contorted with a mix of spite and deep-seated insecurity. He admits that his hatred for Haru stemmed from the intolerable fact that someone else might actually possess a strength greater than his own. The dark recollection is suddenly shattered when Alice grabs his arm, her face beaming with a cheerful, carefree smile. She loudly declares her hunger now that their work is finished, pulling him back into the warmth of the present moment. Following her lead, they find themselves at a local tavern where a lavish spread of food is laid out before them. While she celebrates the completion of their first quest with infectious excitement, he sits quietly, the contrast between her joy and his heavy heart becoming increasingly stark. While the meal continues, he watches her, moved by the way she reached out to him when he was at his lowest. The realization finally takes hold. Because she has been so genuinely kind and offered him a place by her side, he owes it to her to finally reveal the truth about who he is. He sits in silence as the Sword Princess lifts her cup, her voice soft and devoid of pressure. She assures him that there is no need to force the words if he is not ready to speak, offering a rare moment of gentleness. In response, his gaze falters, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features as he processes her unexpected patience and the weight of the secrets he carries. She continues, acknowledging that while sharing one's burdens doesn't always provide a solution, the act of speaking can sometimes lighten the weight on one's heart, making the path forward feel less daunting. As he remains quiet, she admits a natural curiosity regarding his history with the hero, yet she emphasizes that his well-being takes precedence over her desire for answers, promising not to pry if it causes him pain. The silence stretches between them until she notes that he had the look of a lost child just moments ago. She then turns her attention to the young girl beside them, ensuring she is comfortable with the direction of their conversation. This mention of a lost child triggers a sudden, vivid memory of a time long ago, when a frantic young girl finally found him in the woods, her face etched with worry as she cried out his name in relief. In that distant past, she had scolded him for his recklessness, questioning what he would have done if he had truly vanished while searching for a stray's parents, while he could only look at the ground in shame. The memory shifts painfully, contrasting the girl who once promised to protect him forever with the cold woman who eventually mocked his very existence, demanding to know if his only value was to serve as a disposable shield. Back in the present, his hand tightens into a white-knuckled fist against the table, the physical strain reflecting the internal battle against these conflicting ghosts of his past. He reflects on the desperate hope he once held, the belief that beneath the scorn and the abuse, his childhood friends still cared for him, only to realize that such a hope was a fragile illusion that had finally reached its breaking point. He sits in silence, the weight of his own thoughts heavier than the meal before him. He wonders if the bond he once felt was merely a figment of his own imagination, a solitary hope unshared by the woman sitting across from him. Memories of a simpler time flicker through his mind, recalling a day when they walked together through the town, sharing a meal that tasted of comfort. Back then, she had been vulnerable, weeping openly while he offered what little solace he could, a stark contrast to the sword princess she had become. The silence is broken as she speaks, her voice soft as she expresses a desire to repay him for saving her life. She looks at him with an earnestness that catches him off guard, proposing that they travel together from this point forward. She continues, her smile brightening as she admits it is a matter of intuition, a feeling that her path is meant to be intertwined with his. He can only stare, the offer hanging in the air between them like a fragile bridge. He looks down, his gaze fixed on the ground as he processes the weight of her request. When she presses him for an answer, he remains hesitant, the shadows of past betrayals still looming large over his heart. Before he can find the words, a harsh, familiar voice cuts through the air, shattering the moment. The hero stands amidst a gathering crowd, his face twisted in a smug grin as he bellows a command for attention. He reaches out with an air of unearned authority, dismissing Haru's hesitation as mere stubbornness. He demands that the swordsman stop acting out and return to his side, treating the previous expulsion as if it were a mere temper tantrum. The hero's face reddens with frustration as he rants about Haru's supposed helplessness, insisting that survival is impossible outside the safety of his party. Haru, however, remains unmoved, dryly reminding the man that he was the one who cast him out in the first place. Infuriated by the lack of submission, the hero lashes out with insults, calling him a talentless fool and demanding obedience to his master. Letitia watches the exchange, her expression hardening as the hero's arrogance reaches a fever pitch. He finally speaks up, his voice calm but firm as he addresses the spectacle the hero is making. He questions the propriety of such a public outburst, turning the eyes of the surrounding crowd back onto the man who claims to be their savior. He stood amidst the growing murmurs of the crowd, who were shocked by the cold interaction they had just witnessed. The onlookers whispered in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the rumors of the Sword Princess's kindness with the harsh reality of her dismissal of the hero. In response to the public humiliation, the hero gritted his teeth, a low growl of frustration escaping him as he watched his former comrade walk away. His pride was wounded, the sting of being ignored by someone of Letitia's stature visible in the sharp lines of his face. Without a backward glance, she issued a quiet command for a meeting at the southern gate later that evening before disappearing into the throng. Her departure left a heavy silence in her wake, the weight of her presence still lingering in the air. The young woman beside him could hardly contain her astonishment, questioning if that truly was the legendary sword princess who had been traveling with them. She noted with a hint of unease that the warrior hadn't even spared her a single glance, as if she were entirely beneath notice. He contemplated the reputation of Letitia Platinus, acknowledging the terrifying skill that had earned her the title of hero after defeating a sealed demon. While the stories of her captivating prowess on the battlefield were undoubtedly true, he found himself pondering the hidden depths of her character that the public never saw. As the sun began to set, his companion gently broke his train of thought, suggesting they find an inn for the night given the late hour. He nodded in agreement, the immediate need for rest momentarily eclipsing his heavy reflections. They soon reached the safety of a local establishment, where she bid him a soft goodnight before heading to her own quarters. Though the day's events weighed heavily on his mind, he prepared to retire, the quiet of the hallway offering a brief respite. Before she disappeared behind her door, she turned back with a look of sudden intensity, reminding him firmly that he was his own person and belonged to no one. It was a necessary anchor, a reminder of his autonomy in a world that often tried to claim him. A small, genuine smile touched his lips as he thanked her, the simple words carrying the weight of his appreciation for her unwavering support. Her kindness provided a much-needed contrast to the cold demands and expectations he had faced throughout the day. Finally alone in the dim light of his room, he collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling in contemplative silence. He looked down at his gloved hand, the upcoming meeting at the southern gate looming in his mind as he braced himself for whatever the next day would bring. Haru gazes down from the balcony at the solitary figure waiting in the courtyard below, the weight of the impending encounter heavy in the air. As he descends to meet her, Letitia immediately erupts in a fit of pique, her voice booming across the stone walls as she sharply reprimands him for his perceived tardiness. She continues her verbal assault with relentless intensity, her face contorted with indignation as she reminds him of his supposed place as a servant and accuses him of biting the hand that feeds him, demanding to know why he would dare keep her waiting. Despite her escalating fury, the young man approaches with a steady, unwavering calm that seems to catch her off guard, causing her to recoil in momentary confusion. He speaks with a quiet, piercing intensity, explaining that his long-standing endurance of her scorn and abuse was born solely from the bond of their childhood friendship, not from any sense of obligation or inferiority. Looking her directly in the eye, he clarifies with chilling finality that he has no memory of ever agreeing to be her servant, a revelation that shatters her carefully constructed reality. The shock of his defiance leaves her breathless and trembling, her mind struggling to process the idea that he ever considered them equals or felt he had the right to stand his ground against her. Driven by a desperate, frantic need for dominance, she lunges forward and seizes him, her voice trembling with a dark possessiveness as she insists that he belongs to her and that she is the only one who can save him. Her obsession deepens into a chilling resolve to exert total control over him, even as he remains haunted by the stark contrast between this woman and the memories of a gentler connection from his past. Finally reaching his breaking point, he forcefully shoves her away and asserts his autonomy, declaring with absolute certainty that he is not a possession to be owned by anyone. He stands firm, his voice steady as he delivers a final farewell. The declaration leaves the sword princess trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rising fury, her eyes wide as she struggles to process his sudden defiance. Because of this rejection, she lunges forward with murderous intent, her blade gleaming as she dares him to try and stop her. She screams a warning, promising to sever his limbs if he continues to resist her authority. The next moment, she unleashes a triple slash, a high-level technique that blurs into a flurry of lethal strikes. He barely has time to register the incredible speed of the assault as the air itself seems to shatter around him. In response, he conjures a shimmering magical barrier, the impact of her blades ringing out as the shield holds firm. She recoils in shock, unable to fathom how a mere beginner-level defense spell could possibly withstand a top-tier sword skill, especially one fueled by her own ridiculous strength. As the dust settles, she adjusts her grip on her weapon, her expression hardening into a mask of cold determination. She offers a hollow apology, stating that if he perishes in the coming exchange, it will be by his own hand for forcing her to take him seriously. Meanwhile, she continues her verbal assault, dismissing his potential use of fire magic and boasting of her superior level, reminding him that she is far more dangerous than any beast he has faced. He remains unervingly calm, offering only a simple, quiet acknowledgement of her threats. Then, he decides to stop holding back, his posture shifting as he begins to channel an immense amount of energy. A massive, glowing orb of pure power coalesces between his hands, the sheer pressure of it causing her to freeze in genuine terror. Moments later, he prepares to unleash the gathered force, his gaze fixed and unwavering. She can only watch in horror, the realization finally dawning on her that he has been suppressing his true capabilities throughout their entire history together. With a deafening roar, the energy is released, resulting in a cataclysmic explosion that consumes the surroundings in a blinding flash of white light. Haru stares in disbelief as the dust settles, his voice barely a whisper as he calls out to Letitia, wondering if she is all right amidst the devastation. He looks down at the fallen figure, the silence of the battlefield heavy with the weight of his own doubt as he questions if the struggle has truly ended. The fallen warrior erupts in a fit of pure denial, his voice cracking as he screams that he cannot accept this outcome. To him, the idea of being bested by someone he has always deemed a failure is an impossibility that shatters his very reality. He continues his desperate rant, his fingers clawing at the earth as he tries to reassert a twisted sense of authority. He insists that nothing has changed, claiming that Haru is still merely a possession, a tool that belongs to him and him alone. As the two remain locked in this tense confrontation, the air between them thick with years of unspoken resentment, the fallen hero refuses to let go of his shattered pride, continuing to speak as if he still held power. He gazes down at his former friend with a heavy heart, realizing that even in the face of total defeat, the man refuses to truly look at him or acknowledge the person he has become. The gap between them has become an unbridgeable chasm of misunderstanding. Deciding that there is no longer any point in trying to reach him, he tells the man to be silent, declaring that he is finished with their conversation and the cycle of abuse that has defined their relationship for so long. He allows himself a moment of quiet reflection on the bond they once shared, mourning the loss of a childhood friend and a companion with whom he spent 5 long years traveling across the world. His mind drifts back to the very beginning, to a sun-drenched memory of a girl with a bright spirit who once looked at him with hope and asked if he would join her on a quest to become a hero. She beams with a radiant, pure joy, her eyes crinkling as she promises that they will always be together. It is a moment of absolute certainty, a vow shared between two souls bound by a common path. But that promise now feels like a hollow echo as a hand clenches into a tight, trembling fist. The bitter realization takes hold that none of those past words or feelings matter anymore in the face of the current devastation. He stares in silent horror as she, battered and bloodied, offers a final, whispered gratitude for everything they shared before bidding him a heartbreaking goodbye. As her hand slips away, he can only cry out in desperation, unable to accept the finality of her departure. Her final thoughts are not of her own pain, but of his survival, believing that her sacrifice is the only way to keep him from death's door. With that heavy burden of love, she collapses, her body finally giving out as the light fades from the world. Long before that tragic end, he had approached her with a hesitant request, formally asking to form a party together. She had been caught completely off guard, her face flushing with a mix of shock and burgeoning hope at the unexpected proposal. She admits her relief, having feared a rejection that never came, and the two of them settle into a quiet breakfast to discuss their future. The plan is simple. Once they finish their meal, they will head to the guild to make their partnership official. As they sit together, she turns the question to him, asking what he truly wants to do now that they are a team. He remains silent, his expression unreadable as he processes the weight of the new journey ahead of them. Their quiet moment is interrupted by the arrival of a self-assured companion who insists that the talentless should simply stop thinking and follow his lead. She readily agrees, deferring the decision-making to him with a trusting smile, unaware of the friction this dynamic creates. Later, the arrogant youth is left reeling when he discovers that the one he looked down upon has vanished on a journey of his own. He demands answers at the guild counter, but the receptionist can offer little information, confirming only that the young man has already departed for parts unknown. He stands frozen in a state of agitated confusion, trying to piece together the sudden departure while his other companions remain blissfully distracted in the background. A nagging suspicion begins to take root, a feeling that something had been fundamentally wrong since the day before. He looms over the trembling guild receptionist, his frustration boiling over as he mutters about the sheer idiocy of having to hunt down his former companion. The weight of his presence causes the young woman to shrink back, her eyes wide with apprehension. Sensing her hesitation, he questions whether disclosing an adventurer's movements might violate guild law. Yet the receptionist, desperate to be helpful, whispers that a wagon bound for Orlando is departing from the west gate. She quickly clarifies that she is merely providing information about a carriage's location, reminding him that she was the one who originally issued their adventurer cards, hoping for a flicker of recognition. This reminder triggers a memory of their earlier days when she was just a trainee. He had been magnanimous then, offering to reduce entry fees and promising to handle whatever requests they brought her way, cementing her loyalty. Tears well in her eyes as she confesses her ignorance of the rift between them, pleading with him to reconcile with his friend because she remembers how well they once worked together. In response to her emotional plea, he offers a thin, chilling smile and a brief word of thanks, his expression betraying none of the warmth she seeks. With that, he turns on his heel and strides out of the guild hall alongside the sword princess, leaving the distraught receptionist behind in the quiet of the lobby. As his boots strike the stone floor with rhythmic precision, he reflects on his own status, convinced that the world naturally bends to his will because of his title. A smug grin spreads across his face as he reaffirms his belief that any fault in their falling out lies solely with the one who fled. His gaze turns predatory, his eyes widening with a manic intensity behind his spectacles as he silently vows that he will never allow his quarry to escape his grasp. The journey continues under a clear sky as the carriage rattles along the path toward the fortress city. Alice leans back, soaking in the warmth and commenting on how pleasant the day has become. As the horse plods forward, she turns her thoughts toward their destination, Orlando, curious about the famous citadel. She notes that the Lord's daughter there is a candidate for the title of Saintess, a role she admits she knows little about firsthand. She goes on to explain the prestige of the position, describing it as a rare class granted only to those who receive a divine oracle. These individuals are said to master every form of healing, possessing the miraculous power to even bring the dead back to life. Feeling a surge of pride in their recent progress, she hums to herself, privately thinking she's done a rather good job so far. Her sudden change in mood leaves her companion blinking in confusion, unable to follow her train of thought. Her gaze then settles on him, and she brightly remarks that his new, shorter haircut really suits him. He is caught off guard by the sudden compliment, admitting he only cut it because it was getting in the way, yet he can't help but feel a bit flustered by her praise. Despite her kind words, he looks down, his expression darkening as he mutters that he is actually quite ugly and unpleasant to look at. This sudden admission of self-loathing leaves her staring at him in utter disbelief. Her shock quickly turns into a fierce, protective intensity as she thrusts a mirror toward him, demanding to know who could have possibly filled his head with such lies. He recoils slightly, startled by how suddenly intimidating she has become. The source of his pain flickers through his mind, a memory of the sword princess looking down on him with cold disdain, telling him to grow his hair out to hide his hideous face. In the present, the weight of this cruelty brings a pained expression to his face, while his companion trembles with indignation. He tries to justify the insult, explaining that since they were children, Letitia has always been right about everything, and he simply accepted her judgment as fact. His companion can only sigh in exasperation, realizing just how deeply those old wounds have warped his self-perception. She reaches out and firmly grips his shoulders, forcing him to look her in the eye as she tells him he needs to have more confidence. She speaks with absolute conviction, reminding him that he is strong and far from the person he believes himself to be. She leans in close, her expression earnest as she confesses her confusion. Despite being a level 82 sage, the source and nature of her overwhelming power remain a mystery to her, a fact that seems to baffle her companion. Continuing her heartfelt appeal, she reminds him of the bravery he showed when he chose to save her instead of fleeing. She insists that such an act is proof of a strong heart, calling him truly powerful and admirable, though he remains stubbornly dismissive of his own worth. Their intimate conversation is shattered by a sudden, violent tremor as a massive shadow looms over the path. They scramble to the edge of the carriage, eyes widening in alarm as they spot a monstrous threat emerging from the foliage just ahead. Nearby, a group of defenders leaps into action to protect their charge. A determined maid steps forward, her voice ringing out with a command for her lady to stand back before she unleashes a searing flare blast against the encroaching beast. The inferno washes over the creature, but as the smoke clears, the defenders' faces pale with dread. Even mid-grade fire magic has failed to leave a mark on the massive, chitinous-shell of the insectoid horror. Realizing the gravity of their situation, the lead maid, 9, urges Lady Ange to flee with the remaining guards while she stays behind to provide a distraction. Ange, her eyes welling with tears, refuses to abandon her friend, knowing that 9 is the only one among them with the strength to even stand against such foes. The monsters, identified as lethal death ants, loom closer, their level far exceeding that of their lone challenger. 9 grits her teeth, the sheer disparity in power becoming a physical weight as the predators prepare to strike. She refuses to give up, channeling her remaining energy into a desperate twin bolt spell. The crackling electricity strikes the lead ant, yet the monster continues its relentless advance, leaving her paralyzed with disbelief. The force of the creature's counterattack sends the brave maid flying through the air like a broken doll. Ange screams in agony, her voice cracking as she watches her protector fall. With their primary defender incapacitated and the death ants closing in, the group is paralyzed by terror. Ange can do nothing but cry out in a desperate prayer, hoping for a miracle to save them from the impending slaughter. She watches in stunned silence as a colossal pillar of fire erupts, incinerating the monstrous ants in an instant. Beside her, the fallen defender looks on with wide eyes as the searing heat washes over them, signaling a sudden and violent shift in the battle. They are quickly reached by their savior, who rushes forward with a look of intense concern, urgently checking if they have sustained any injuries. Behind him, his companion follows, her face etched with worry. The young noblewoman can hardly believe her eyes, stammering a question about whether the devastating blast was indeed high-level explosion magic. Her companion, however, is less impressed by the display of power, sharply reprimanding the young man for his recklessness and the danger he posed to the very people he was trying to save. He offers a sheepish apology, kneeling down to begin tending to their wounds. He suddenly freezes, his gaze drawn to a simple cross-shaped rosary hanging from the girl's neck as her hood slips back. The sight of it, combined with her delicate, blushing features, leaves him momentarily breathless. As the wind ruffles her hair, he finds himself captivated by her presence, his mind racing with questions about the true identity of this mysterious traveler he has just rescued. Haru rushes to Nine's side, asking if she is all right after the skirmish. She bows deeply, apologizing to her mistress for her poor performance. Haru then takes the initiative to introduce himself and Alice, thanking the newcomers for their help. As he speaks, he notices a strange intensity in the young girl's gaze. She stares at him with wide, shimmering eyes, whispering his name as if in a trance, which leaves him visibly unsettled. Seeing her mistress frozen, Nine gently prompts her to return the introduction. The girl snaps out of it, stammering an apology, while Haru tries to hide his discomfort at being the center of such focused attention. She finally finds her voice, introducing herself as Ange, the daughter of the Lord of Orlando and a saintess in training, with Nine as her personal maid. Haru makes the connection, realizing the rosary she wears is a mark of her divine selection. He turns his attention back to the maid, complimenting her impressive display of healing magic. She remains humble, however, insisting that she still has much to learn in the mystic arts. The conversation shifts as Nine inquires if the two adventurers are in any particular hurry. Haru admits that they aren't currently bound by any pressing engagement. Seizing the opportunity, she makes a bold request, asking if they would be willing to escort them on her lady's pilgrimage. The suggestion catches even Ange by surprise, her eyes widening at the sudden proposal. She goes on to explain that this journey is a necessary trial for Ange to truly ascend to her role as a saintess. Haru listens, trying to process the weight of such a task and what it would mean for them to join. With their carriage likely long gone, Nine elaborates on their mission to visit and pray at the secluded graves of fallen heroes. Alice expresses her gratitude for the explanation, her kind nature shining through as she considers the noble cause. He points toward the horizon, noting that the specific grave they seek lies atop the distant, jagged peaks of the Crest Mountains. As he looks at the daunting terrain, he can't help but wonder why anyone would choose such an inaccessible place for a final resting stone. He listens as the guild receptionist explains the logic behind the hero's resting place, noting that those who sealed away demons are worshipped in the holy mountains. His frustration grows as the receptionist points out that Letitia is essentially a stranger to these lands, making the presence of skilled adventurers like him even more vital. He is further pressured when Nine reinforces the plea, reminding him of his prowess when he incinerated a swarm of death ants. Though he remains humble and doubts his own utility, he eventually yields to the group's consensus to accept the task, acknowledging that continuing on foot would have been difficult without mutual support. His lingering doubt is met with a whisper from the receptionist, who warns that refusing such a request from people of their standing would cause them to lose face. He is then approached by the young girl, Ange, who asks to be addressed simply by her name as a token of her gratitude, prompting a sharp reminder from the receptionist about noble etiquette. He offers a gentle smile in return, insisting that she simply call him Haru, a gesture of informal friendship that catches her completely off guard. His casual tone leaves her utterly flustered, her face flushing a deep crimson as she struggles to process the exchange while her companions look on with amusement. They gather around a crackling campfire later that evening to plan their ascent, realizing the rugged mountain terrain will force them to abandon their cart at daybreak. She reflects on her resolve while eating, determined to honor the people of Orlando who entrusted her with this pilgrimage, as her companions quietly observe her. She gazes up at the starlit sky, her voice soft as she shares the weight of her resolve. She explains that while her father's duties kept him away, the kindness of the people in Orlando sustained her, and now she seeks to become a saintess to return that favor, even if only in some small measure. As she finishes, he listens in silence, his expression softening as the sincerity of her words sinks in. A simple acknowledgement escapes his lips, a quiet, "I see," that carries the weight of his newfound understanding of her burden. He finds the moment of reflection broken when the young girl with the light hair chimes in, her eyes wide with genuine admiration. When he tries to dismiss his previous display as mere fire magic, she counters with enthusiasm, insisting that being able to manifest an explosion at his age is nothing short of extraordinary. She leaves him caught completely off guard by her intense reaction, his face a mask of bewilderment as he tries to grasp why they are so impressed. Beside him, the maid and the girl are visibly shaken, their expressions shifting from awe to a frantic disbelief as if they've just witnessed something that defies all logic. He watches as the girl with the long, light hair explains the standard of their world, gesturing to illustrate that a typical fire spell produces only a modest fireball meant for basic combat. He stares back, his eyes wide with a dawning realization that his own basic magic might be far more potent than he ever imagined. She is joined by the maid, whose voice is sharp with incredulity as she demands to know how he could possibly mistake such massive firepower for a simple spell. He can only stammer in response, his own confusion mirroring theirs as he questions the very nature of the magic he has been using all this time. She watches as he humbly admits that his repertoire is limited to only 3 beginner-level spells: fire, healing, and a basic shield. He then turns to the maid, asking with earnest curiosity if she would be willing to teach him a more advanced technique like Flare Blast, unaware of the shock his request is about to cause. He is met with a heavy, stunned silence, the 3 women staring at him with wide eyes and frozen expressions. He recoils slightly, the sudden lack of noise more unsettling than any shout, as he realizes he has said something that has completely floored his companions. They remain frozen until the girl with the light hair finally breaks the silence, her voice rising in disbelief as she questions how he could have traveled for 5 years and only learned 3 spells. He tries to defend himself, explaining that he began his studies alone, but his words are drowned out by her insistence that his situation is utterly bizarre. While she continues her tirade, a shadow of the past looms, a figure with a dark gaze questioning the necessity of certain actions. The focus shifts abruptly to a hand reaching for a scroll or a blade. The air is suddenly thick, with a different kind of tension that cuts through the previous comedic confusion. The young traveler admits his magical knowledge is limited to the most basic level, much to Alice's visible disbelief. She stares at him with wide, intense eyes, suggesting that perhaps he should stick to manual labor like splitting wood rather than attempting to memorize complex spells. He is interrupted by Nine, who offers a surprising solution. She proposes to teach him a spell called Flare Blast, acknowledging that while she isn't sure how much help she can be, she is willing to try. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the young man impulsively asks for a hug, leaving Alice baffled by the sudden shift in tone. She graciously accepts the request for instruction, explaining that she feels obligated to help someone to whom her lady is so deeply indebted. His face lights up with pure joy at the prospect of finally learning more advanced magic. The head maid of the Autumn household stands tall, her expression turning serious as she prepares to begin the lesson. She admits that seeing a young person with such untapped potential truly fires her up, though Alice watches with a growing sense of dread, fearing that Nine might turn out to be a mercilessly strict instructor. Moments later, they gather in an open field where she begins her lecture, describing magic as a complex puzzle. She explains that one must take raw magical energy and carefully shape it into the perfect piece to achieve the desired effect, utilizing various elements and combinations. She continues the demonstration, detailing the intricate variables involved, the precise amount of magic, its density, the chosen element, and the intended distance and trajectory. She warns that if the pieces aren't formed correctly, or if the process takes too long, the spell will simply crumble and fail to activate, emphasizing that precision is just as vital as power. With a sudden burst of energy, she chants the incantation for Flare Blast, releasing a controlled explosion of light and heat. She explains that she performed the sequence as slowly as possible for his benefit, asking if he was able to follow the flow of mana. He immediately prepares to replicate the feat, his hands beginning to glow with a volatile energy. Seeing the sheer power gathering in his palms, Alice and Ange rush forward in a panic, desperately pleading with him to hold back and not unleash his full strength on his very first try. They manage to stop him just in time, pointing out that a full power blast would likely level the entire area. While the others catch their breath, the maid reflects on the fact that while most students take a month to master this spell, this particular young man seems capable of grasping it in an instant. The group stands before the towering, intricately carved stone entrance of the hero's grave, marking the end of their long pilgrimage. They reflect on their surprisingly easy journey, expressing relief that no monsters cross their path as they reach this sacred and imposing destination. As they stand in the shadow of the massive gate, Ange wonders aloud how such a formidable barrier could ever be breached. Nine remains silent, her gaze sharp and wary, while Haru notes an unsettling stillness in the air, a silence that feels heavy and expectant. Stepping forward, the saintess places a gentle hand against the cold stone, explaining that her touch is the key to releasing the seal. In response, the ancient mechanism shimmers with light, and the massive doors groan open, revealing the dark corridor beyond to the wide-eyed travelers. She confirms that the pilgrimage of a saintess is indeed a fearsome thing, though her smile remains pleasant as she adds a chilling detail. The seal will eventually reactivate, and the doors will close, trapping anyone left inside. Haru and Alice can only stare in shock at how casually she delivers such a terrifying warning. Deep within the silent tomb, a solitary stone coffin rests upon a raised platform, flanked by two sturdy pillars that disappear into the shadows of the high ceiling. Approaching the sarcophagus alone, Ange asks the rest of the group to remain back for a moment. She moves with a sense of solemn purpose, standing before the ancient stone as she prepares to fulfill her duty. She closes her eyes and clasps her hands in a silent, fervent prayer, her face a mask of deep concentration as she connects with the power lingering in the room. Suddenly, a brilliant pillar of light descends from above, enveloping her in a celestial glow. Haru watches from the sidelines, his breath catching at the sudden and violent display of divine energy. Within the radiance, small, shimmering orbs of light begin to manifest, swirling softly around her before being drawn into her body, as if she were a vessel for the ancient power. He watches in silent awe, the realization finally dawning on him that the light isn't just surrounding her, but is being actively absorbed into her very being. He watches in silence as the ritual concludes, the weight of the ancient tradition finally clear. It is said that a saintess truly comes into her power during this pilgrimage, and the evidence of that divine transformation fills the silent, stone chamber. The holy woman exhales a long, weary breath, the spiritual exertion finally taking its toll as she announces the prayer is complete. Below the altar, her small companion reacts with a start as the heavy, mystical atmosphere of the tomb begins to lift. He moves instinctively, catching the exhausted woman before she can collapse onto the cold floor. She stammers a flustered response, her face flushing with embarrassment as she finds herself supported by his steady, protective arms. Nearby, the others observe the aftermath of the ritual. Alice expresses her amazement at the insight shown by her companions, while Nine confesses that her earlier pushiness was driven by a desire to keep the young swordsman close to them. Their conversation is cut short by a sudden cry of alarm. Ange is burning with a feverish heat, her strength failing her completely as she begins to lose consciousness. She looks on with a heavy heart, contemplating the unfairness of the saintess's fate. To her, the girl is more than just a vessel for divine power. She is a human being who shouldn't have to abandon her own heart or sacrifice her happiness for the sake of saving others. They eventually emerge from the depths of the tomb, and the tension briefly eases as Letitia suggests they return to Orlando. She mentions that a messenger was sent ahead the previous night, and she expects a feast will be prepared to celebrate their successful journey. He suddenly feels a shift in the air as a massive shadow looms over the group. Looking up, he is met with the terrifying sight of a dragon descending from the peaks, its slit-pupiled eye fixed upon them as if it had been waiting for the seal to break. The arrogant youth, far away in the fortress city of Orlando, stares at the horizon in utter disbelief. The sudden appearance of the beast has thrown the city into a state of confusion, leaving him to wonder what chaos is unfolding at the pilgrimage site. He grinds his teeth in frustration, cursing his own perceived incompetence and the absence of his rival. The delay is intolerable, and he begins to question if he should have simply searched for the path himself instead of waiting for others to act like fools. Below in the city streets, panic spreads like wildfire among the citizens. They shout warnings of the dragon sighted on the Crest Mountains, their fear amplified by the knowledge that the saintess is currently there on her sacred journey, now directly in the path of the beast. The city of Orlando is in an uproar. Citizens scramble through the streets, their voices thick with urgency as they discuss the need to inform Lady Ange's family of the unfolding crisis. They realize that standard magic will be useless against the dragon's natural resistance, prompting calls for the immediate mobilization of elite adventurers capable of wielding advanced spells. Amidst the growing chaos, rumors begin to spread like wildfire among the common folk. Two men huddle together, whispering about the latest reports from the front, while the sword princess strides past them, her expression one of cold indifference to their idle chatter. She continues on her way, but the snippets of their conversation follow her. They speak of a mysterious male wizard, a man who supposedly wielded fire magic of such overwhelming intensity that he single-handedly rescued Lady Ange before accompanying the group toward the treacherous peaks of the Crest Mountains. Suddenly, she breaks into a sprint, her boots pounding against the cobblestones with a ferocity that startles the onlookers. People dive out of her path, some even wondering aloud if a wild beast has been let loose in the city as she blurs past them in a desperate rush. As she runs, her mind is a whirlwind of frustration and self-reproach directed entirely at the young man who defied her warnings. She curses Haru's recklessness, reminding herself that as the designated hero, it is her burden to bear, yet she finds herself unable to explain the sudden, frantic impulse driving her forward. Her pace slows as a heavy realization begins to settle in her chest. She stops to catch her breath, the weight of her own contradictions pressing down on her as she questions the very foundation of her current path. Standing alone amidst the bustle of the city, she gazes into the distance with a look of profound uncertainty. The singular question that has long been buried beneath her duty finally surfaces. What was the true reason she sought the mantle of the hero in the first place? He clutched his head, the weight of his own aspirations crushing him. He had always wanted to be the hero, to stand at the forefront of the battle, yet as he watched the chaos unfold around him, a single, agonizing question echoed in his mind. Why? Because of this internal conflict, a searing pain tore through his skull. Every time he reached for that specific, elusive memory, the one that felt like the key to everything, an unbearable headache surged, leaving him gasping and disoriented while the sounds of combat blurred into a dull roar. Within the depths of his fractured consciousness, he struggled to maintain control. He knew he had to protect himself, to keep his burgeoning power hidden from the world, even as the memory of a defeated demon flickered like a dying ember in the dark. Suddenly, a jagged shadow tore through the air, striking him with lethal precision. The impact was a cold, sharp shock that sent a spray of crimson across the ground, his body reeling from the unexpected blow. In the wake of the strike, he made a desperate choice. If his mind was a storm of jumbled, conflicting thoughts, then the only solution was to lock them away, sealing the chaos behind a wall of sheer will to survive the moment. He gasped, his eyes snapping wide as the mental barriers slammed shut. The fog of pain and confusion lifted in an instant, replaced by a chilling, unnatural clarity. With a sudden, jarring shift in demeanor, he looked up and laughed, a bright, confident smile masking whatever darkness lurked beneath. He declared himself a genius, his movements now fluid and decisive as he prepared to strike back. Meanwhile, the group found themselves facing a far more ancient threat. As they gazed upon the massive, scaled form of a dragon, they realized these were not mere monsters but a proud, independent race that viewed humans as nothing more than a nuisance to be eradicated. The maid stepped forward, her expression grim as she analyzed the situation. She warned them that a simple flash bomb would be useless against such a creature, explaining that superior dragons possessed an incredible resistance to magic that rendered most tools ineffective. High above them, the winged warrior looked down with a cold, commanding gaze. She warned them against the folly of resistance, her voice carrying the weight of an ultimatum. Do not even think about fighting her. She looms over them, her voice a low rumble as she dismisses their human magic and steel as useless toys. With a cold finality, she offers them a grim choice, a slow death by dismemberment or a swift end in her gullet. The group stands paralyzed, the weight of her ancient presence crushing their hope. He breaks the suffocating silence, raising a hand with a tentative gesture that seems almost absurdly polite given the circumstances. With a calm that borders on the surreal, he asks if they might simply talk. catching the great beast off guard. The young man reasons that because she possesses the gift of human speech, a dialogue should be possible, much to the horror of his companion who can only watch in frantic disbelief. He ignores the panicked cries behind him, focusing entirely on the massive creature before him. He continues his gamble, offering a sincere apology for their accidental trespass into her domain. His gaze is steady, showing no sign of the terror that gripped him moments before as he attempts to navigate this lethal encounter with diplomacy. Explaining their presence as a mere errand at the hero's grave, he asks if she might find it in her heart, or her pride, to let them depart in peace. The dragon's massive eye narrows, scrutinizing the tiny, bold creature who dares to negotiate. A heavy silence falls over the clearing as the two stand in stark contrast. A lone boy against a mountain of scales and ancient power. The world seems to hold its breath, waiting for the dragon's judgment. Suddenly, the dragon's head snaps back as she erupts into thunderous laughter, the sound echoing through the trees. She finds the notion of a human addressing her as an equal to be the height of absurdity, leaving the boy to wonder if his attempt at logic was somehow flawed. Leaning closer, her slitted eyes lock onto his, noting his attire and correctly identifying him as a practitioner of the arcane. Intrigued by his audacity, she proposes a wager to settle their fate. She challenges him to strike her with the full extent of his magical prowess, promising to let them go if he can make her flinch even a single inch. Despite the impossible odds, he accepts the challenge with a sharp, determined nod, ignoring the skepticism of his friends. With a sudden burst of energy, he unleashes a searing flare blast that illuminates the clearing in a violent flash of heat and light. As the smoke clears, he looks on with a mix of hope and uncertainty, asking the ancient beast for her verdict on his desperate display of power. He watched as the smoke cleared from the dragon's hide. The massive creature stood there, its scales slightly charred, but its form largely intact despite the magical blast. Behind him, his companions stood in stunned silence, their faces pale with disbelief. Alice questioned his very humanity, while Sana observed that the dragon's natural magic resistance was the only thing that saved it from Haru's spell. Letitia, still trembling, admitted she had truly feared for her life. Turning to the winged girl with a cheerful smile, he thanked her for the guidance, claiming he had finally gotten the hang of things thanks to her advice. Letitia could only stare back in mute shock, her mind reeling at his casual demeanor. The dragon's large eye widened in sheer terror as he offered a sheepish apology. He explained that he had actually held back his power to honor a promise made to a comrade, a revelation that left Letitia shouting in exasperated disbelief. With a bashful expression, he asked if they could simply disregard that previous attempt so he could try again, this time unleashing his magic at its true, full capacity. In response, the legendary beast suddenly plummeted, slamming its massive head into the dirt in a desperate gesture of submission. It roared out a plea for forgiveness, its pride completely shattered by the young man's overwhelming potential. Tears began to well in the creature's eyes as it sobbed into the earth, lamenting its own arrogance. It confessed to having spent its long life terrorizing humans for sport, never imagining a mortal of such caliber existed, while he looked on, baffled by the sight of a dragon burying its head in the ground. The three women watched the pathetic display with a mixture of pity and awe, finally coming to terms with the fact that their companion possessed the strength to humble an ancient dragon. The beast continued to wail, begging for its life to be spared. Feeling a wave of sympathy, he reached out to the weeping creature, suggesting that it simply reflect on its past behavior and move forward. He assured the dragon that he held no grudge, a gesture of kindness that the beast found incredibly merciful. It looked up at him, struck by the contrast between its own petty pride and his humble nature. The dragon marveled at how someone with such immense power could remain so grounded and forgiving, even after being attacked without provocation. He suddenly declared that a decision had been made, catching the young man off guard. As the maid introduced herself as Sana, the great beast mused over the name Haru, noting its human-like quality with a hint of disdain, calling him a traitor. The massive creature leaned in close, his jaws wide as he roared his new ambition. He would become the young man's student. The warrior could only stare in wide-eyed disbelief, a cold sweat breaking out as the absurdity of the request hit him. He stammered, unable to find the words to respond to such a preposterous demand. Sensing the hesitation, the dragon pressed on, questioning if the group was against the idea of having a dragon companion. Behind him, the young women watched the exchange in stunned silence, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief at the bizarre turn of events. Letitia stands confidently, her dark wings unfurled, while Alice, now in her human form, clings to Haru in a desperate plea. The young man is visibly distressed, caught between the dragon's sudden transformation and her tearful insistence on joining their journey. She continues her emotional appeal, sobbing and begging to be taken with them, while he clutches his head in frustration, completely at a loss for how to handle the situation. In response to his distress, the girl offers to become his slave if he won't accept her as a student, a suggestion that sends a shockwave of horror through both him and the hero. The hero stares at him with wide, trembling eyes, her face pale with disbelief as she accuses him of something utterly unfair and morally reprehensible. She demands an explanation for the bizarre scene, pointing at the girl's strange appearance and the scandalous offer she just made, while he frantically tries to clarify the misunderstanding. The argument escalates as she dismisses his excuses, pointing an accusing finger while he shouts back, trying to make sense of the chaotic turn of events. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, the maid steps in and pulls the agitated hero aside, attempting to restore some semblance of order. Despite her efforts, a loud declaration about the hero's love rings out, leaving the men, including the young genius Maru, frozen in stunned silence. The warrior then adopts a more composed, almost lecturing tone, remarking on how forcing one's feelings onto another can become a form of bullying. Even for someone as legendary as a hero, he can only stare in disbelief, sweating as he realizes the sheer hypocrisy of her lecture, given that she is currently the one trying to force her way into his life as a student. He stood there, his mind racing as he analyzed the sheer scale of the hero's power. He knew that Letitia's stats were far beyond normal measurement, and if she truly lost her temper, the very mountain they stood upon might not survive. Desperation took hold as he reached out, pleading for her to stop before the situation spiraled out of control. In response to his plea, she froze, her face flushing a deep crimson as beads of sweat formed on her brow. The fierce warrior was suddenly replaced by a girl gripped by an overwhelming, visible agitation. Observing this shift from a distance, the maid calmly remarked that if one had to label such behavior, it would undoubtedly be that of a yandere. Her companion tilted her head in confusion, wondering if tsundere wasn't a more fitting term, while the subject of their gossip shrieked in frantic denial. The maid continued her analysis, suggesting that since they all shared an affection for their master, they should simply try to find common ground. While the dragon girl looked on with a bewildered expression, the hero seemed to find some dark amusement in the suggestion, her previous fluster replaced by a sharp, knowing grin. This exchange triggered a sudden, jarring realization within him. Letitia was actually in love with him. The thought hung heavy in the air, casting her erratic behavior and explosive outbursts in a completely new and terrifying light. As he struggled to process this revelation, she launched into a display of chaotic energy that left him staring in utter disbelief. The others watched from the sidelines, equally baffled by the sudden shift in the atmosphere as he questioned the very nature of what he was witnessing. She threw her head back and laughed, a wild, triumphant sound, declaring that they would soon regret opposing her. The prospect of sabotaging their quest by seizing control of the area seemed to fill her with a twisted sense of joy. Recognizing the need for immediate action, he moved toward the ancient, ornate doors, ignoring the worried protests of his companion. With a focused effort, he began to trigger the magical seals, the stone surface beginning to glow with a restrictive light. He maintained a cold, detached expression as the heavy doors began to groan shut, sealing the volatile hero inside. Though he knew her strength would eventually allow her to break free, he calculated that the barrier would buy them at least a few days of much-needed peace. From behind the now-sealed entrance, the sound of frantic scratching and muffled sobs echoed through the stone. The realization of his ruthlessness left her trembling in fear, vowing to herself that she would never again risk incurring the true wrath of the man she claimed to love. The night sky stretches out, silent and indifferent to the turmoil below. Voices drift through the air as the group settles in, weary from the day's events, calling out words of encouragement and the need for rest. She is not among them, however, as Alice looks around the camp with a growing sense of concern. While the others discuss sleeping arrangements, with the young genius Maru boastfully claiming he can sleep on the cold ground, Alice frets over the lack of blankets, her eyes searching for the one person who is missing from their circle. High above the camp, the young man stands solitary upon a snow-dusted ridge, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The weight of his recent actions and the revelation of the hero's feelings press heavily upon him, isolating him even from his closest companions. He is soon joined by Alice, who approaches with a gentle but firm request. She asks that from now on, he inform her before wandering off alone, reminding him of their bond as partners and her desire to stand by his side. His expression remains clouded, his mind a chaotic whirl of conflicting thoughts. He admits that his head is scrambled, struggling to process the sudden shift in his understanding of the world and the people within it. Turning his attention back to her, he breaks the silence with a tentative call. She responds immediately, her focus entirely on him, waiting for whatever truth he is about to share. He poses a difficult question, wondering if one is obligated to accept another's love simply because it is offered. She offers a comforting perspective, suggesting that what truly matters are his own feelings, and that there is no single right way to respond to such a confession. Memories of his time with the hero flood back, a time when their companionship felt natural and effortless. Before he understood the complexity of her nature, the thought of leaving her side had never even crossed his mind. He had tried to bury those memories, forcing himself to face a harsh reality, but her declaration of love has upended everything. The cold logic he used to seal her away now wars with the lingering warmth of their shared past. Despite his admission of having a secret, perhaps even selfish motive, she remains steadfast. While she cannot help him with his hidden burdens, she vows to always be his ally, leaving him to grapple with the uncertainty of his own desires. He listens as his companion offers a new perspective, suggesting that the very act of searching for a purpose could be their primary objective. While he questions the validity of such a vague goal, she insists that the path of an adventurer is bound by no rigid rules. Seizing the moment, he turns the conversation toward her, inquiring about the motivations that led her to this life. He observes her startled expression as she is caught off guard by the sudden inquiry, her eyes widening in surprise. He admits that despite their time together, he had never thought to ask what drove her to leave home and take up the mantle of an adventurer. She offers a gentle smile as she explains that her reasons aren't particularly grand or complex. She simply has someone important she wishes to find, a singular person who serves as her guiding star in this vast world. The young woman suddenly becomes flustered, her hands waving frantically as she recounts meeting those who helped her just as she was losing her way, and then meeting him. Overwhelmed by her own words, she begins to stammer, insisting they must hurry to find this mysterious individual, leaving him utterly bewildered by her sudden shift in energy. She decides to end the conversation there, announcing her return to camp and warning him to stay warm against the biting mountain breeze. He watches her retreating figure, the silence of the snowy peaks settling between them once more as he processes her frantic departure. Trudging through the snow, she feels a heavy realization weigh on her heart. She nearly spoke a truth that is still too dangerous to reveal. Looking back at him with a gaze full of hidden longing, she whispers a secret to the wind. He is the very person she has been searching for all this time. A carriage wheel rattles as a young Alice peers out, her eyes wide with wonder. Her mother checks on her, ensuring she's comfortable, while the girl's gaze remains fixed on the horizon. This moment, 10 years in the past, marks the beginning of a life-changing encounter. Upon arriving at their destination, her parents begin the arduous task of moving their belongings into their new home. They encourage her to explore the surroundings, and she looks down upon a picturesque village nestled in the valley, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkening hills. Before she sets off, her mother pulls her into a warm embrace, offering a gentle reminder to stay close and return in time for her medicine. She chirps a cheerful agreement, eager to experience the world outside. She wanders through the lush greenery, pausing to admire the vibrant flowers and the gentle flow of a nearby stream. The world feels vast and full of life, a stark contrast to the confines she likely knew before. As she breathes in the crisp, clean air, a sense of relief washes over her. For the first time, she finds herself able to walk a significant distance without the usual burden of physical pain, her heart light with newfound freedom. Her peaceful reflection on how this village might finally cure her ailment is shattered by a sudden, jarring noise. She lets out a startled cry, the tranquility of the meadow instantly replaced by a moment of pure shock. Recovering from the surprise, she finds herself sitting on the grass, facing a young boy with messy hair and a curious expression. He asks if she is the newcomer everyone has been talking about, and she timidly offers her name, still a bit shaken by the encounter. The boy's face breaks into a wide, genuine grin as he extends a hand toward her. He introduces himself as Haru and, with an infectious energy, asks if she would like to play with him. She reaches out and takes his hand, a simple gesture that cements the beginning of their long history together. This was the exact moment their paths crossed, a memory etched deeply into her mind. As they sit together, he listens intently as she explains her situation, realizing that she moved here to escape the dusty city air that aggravated her illness. She offers a small, apologetic smile, explaining that she might not be able to keep up with energetic games like tag, but he seems more than happy just to have her company. She listens as Haru enthusiastically offers to show her the village once she feels better, and they spend the day walking together in a rare moment of freedom. However, her fragile health soon fails her, and when he and his mother come to visit, they are met with the news that she is bedridden with a fever. From her bed, she watches him through the window, her heart heavy with the realization that even a weekly walk is too much for her body to handle. Tucked beneath the covers, her only desire is to recover quickly so she can return to his side and play like a normal child. Despite her limitations, he remains a constant, protective presence, always mindful of her physical condition during their brief outings. He is often joined by the energetic Letitia, and he immediately reaches out to steady her, reminding her to be careful as she bursts onto the scene. The young hero-to-be vents her frustrations about the expectations of adults, who constantly nag her about getting muddy or not acting ladylike enough. She watches as Alice admits a secret longing, a wish that she were healthy enough to even have the chance to get caked in mud. She is surprised when the winged girl softens her expression, offering a sincere wish for her friend's recovery instead of her usual bravado. Her genuine kindness leaves Alice wide-eyed, deeply touched by the simple, heartfelt warmth of her companion. She had been worried, even fearing that Letitia harbored some secret resentment toward her. But as Letitia arrived, breathless and apologetic for her tardiness, those fears vanished. Haru stood by, watching the exchange as Letitia explained she hadn't meant to leave Alice alone, especially given her fragile health, and apologized for the misunderstanding. As the energetic girl hurried away, warning them not to worry about her, she left a warmth behind. Watching her retreating figure, the young woman turned to her companion, remarking on just how kind their friend truly was, a sentiment he quietly echoed. A quiet hope began to bloom within her, a dream of a day when her body wouldn't fail her, allowing her to run and play alongside them without restraint. Her friend offered a bright, supportive smile, sharing in that optimistic vision of a future where they could all be free. They shared a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, the kind of happiness that felt almost too perfect to be real. It was no exaggeration to say that in that moment, the world felt right, and their bond felt unbreakable. She truly believed that this newfound sense of contentment was healing her, as if the sheer weight of her happiness was enough to push back the shadows of her chronic illness. Hand in hand, they wandered through the fields, the future looking brighter than it ever had before. Her fragile peace was shattered in an instant when a violent, hacking cough seized her, and the copper tang of blood filled her mouth. Her companion's face drained of color, his eyes widening in sheer terror as he realized the severity of the sudden attack. She felt the world tilt as she collapsed, the festive atmosphere of the village festival becoming a cruel backdrop to her agony. She had been so happy, so full of life because of his invitation, making the sudden onset of this unprecedented attack all the more devastating. Her collapse triggered a wave of chaos as the boy screamed for help, his voice cracking with desperation as he begged for a doctor. Fortunately, the adults were quick to respond, rushing to their side and providing the intervention that narrowly snatched her from the jaws of death. She felt the trauma of that moment linger, a dark stain on what should have been a day of celebration. Staring at her blood-slicked hands, the realization of her own mortality crashed down upon her once more, heavier than ever. Looking into his horrified eyes, she saw the reflection of her own shattered dreams. That day, the fragile illusion of her recovery was destroyed, and the life they had known began to crumble into pieces. Haru was devastated by Alice's collapse, blaming himself until he became physically ill. For 2 weeks, his health declined rapidly as he refused food and wept constantly, his spirit breaking under the weight of perceived failure. While he withered away in guilt, Alice finally regained enough strength to confront her parents. She desperately wanted to apologize and explain that her condition wasn't his fault, but her mother hesitated, fearing that seeing him in such a state would only cause more pain. She realized then that a mere conversation wouldn't heal the deep scars in his heart. Turning to her parents with a sudden, sharp focus, she asked if the magic they had used to treat her illness could be applied in a different, more drastic way to save her friend. She made a heart-wrenching request to erase every single memory Haru had of her existence. Her parents were horrified, begging her not to torment herself with such a sacrifice, but she remained steadfast, insisting that it was the only way to stop his suffering. The young girl broke down, tears streaming as she declared that because he was her first and dearest friend, she couldn't allow him to waste away because of her. She pleaded with them one last time, her voice a desperate cry for them to save the boy she loved from the prison of his own mind. Eventually, they gave in to her wishes and performed the ritual. As the magic took hold, his health miraculously returned, his body healing the moment the memory of her was gone. To ensure the seal on his mind remained unbroken and he would never accidentally trigger a recovery, she chose to leave the village forever, disappearing from his life, so he would never have a reason to remember her. Now, years later, she remains haunted by the choice, weeping in solitude over the precious bond that now exists only in her own heart. Years passed after the illness was finally overcome. The desk remained cluttered with the remnants of intense study and the long, arduous road to recovery. She had found a reason to keep going, a singular purpose that drove her through the long years of solitude and preparation. Looking at her reflection, she realized she couldn't simply walk away after altering his life so drastically. Her own selfishness wouldn't allow it. She needed to find a way back to his side, to protect him, even if it meant starting over from nothing and hiding her true self. To achieve this, she used magic to alter her appearance, masking her distinctive silver hair with a darker hue. She took up the life of an adventurer, searching for him in their old village, only to find he had already departed with the hero, Letitia. Using Letitia's rising fame as a guide, she began to track their movements across the land, always staying just a few steps behind. Eventually, her search led her to a guild where she overheard shocking news. The receptionist was incredulous, questioning if the man known as the traitor had truly abandoned the hero's party, a fact she quietly confirmed with a heavy heart. The news grew more dire as the guild workers discussed the lack of solo quests and the mystery behind his sudden departure from Letitia's side. Hearing their concern and the rumors of his struggle, a cold realization washed over her. He was in serious trouble and had nowhere to turn. His name echoed in her mind, a constant refrain of worry and longing that she couldn't suppress. She focused on the information at hand, her eyes scanning the documents for any clue to his current whereabouts while the others continued their frantic chatter in the background. A heavy weight settled in her chest as she whispered a silent plea to the void, hoping that despite her desperate efforts to find him, he would never truly remember who she was or the sacrifice she had made. As she prepared to depart, a voice called out to her, but her mind was already miles away, focused solely on the path that would lead her back to him. She finally drops the facade, revealing her true name as Alice Sprite. Admitting her naivety, she explains that a simple change in hair color couldn't hide her identity forever, especially with her real name recorded on her guild card. She looks at him with a mix of vulnerability and relief, hoping he understands why she kept the secret. He responds with a gentle, radiant smile, confessing that her presence always brings him peace. To him, she has always been the one coming to his rescue, and knowing her true identity only strengthens the bond he feels toward her. He finds the tender moment abruptly shattered as their companions interject. The maid bristles with an inexplicable irritation, demanding to know why the girl is so angry, while the young boy throws himself at his mentor, pleading for a chance to be the one relied upon for once. She remains lost in thought amidst the noise, her gaze hardening with a quiet resolve. This mission is more than a simple quest. It is her path to atonement, and ensuring his safety has become her very reason for being, regardless of the time it takes. He shifts the conversation to the pressing issue of the hero, his brow furrowed in confusion. He cannot fathom why someone he once shared such a close bond with would turn against him so sharply, concluding that the core of their current troubles lies with her behavior. She observes him closely, detecting a strange intensity in his focus on his former comrade. While he dismisses the hero's behavior as merely being warped, she senses a deeper, more troubling mystery beneath the surface of his fixation. Their journey brings them to the gates of Orlando, a city that has been transformed into a grim fortress. A frantic servant from the Autumn estate meets them, urging them to enter through the rear entrance to avoid notice, while hinting at dire news regarding the young lady of the house. They are met with a shocking revelation. A malicious rumor is spreading through the city, claiming that the noble daughter is commanding monsters to terrorize the populace. While the girl reacts with visible outrage at the slander, the young man remains focused, insisting they gather more information immediately. They are eventually ushered into the presence of Cardell Autumn, the master of the estate and lord of the region. He greets them with a weary but sincere gratitude, specifically thanking the young man for the protection he provided to his daughter, Alice. The nobleman offers a somber apology, explaining that the gravity of their current predicament prevents him from hosting the celebratory feast they deserve. Confused by the heavy atmosphere and the strange rumors, the young adventurer presses for the truth of what is happening in the city. He stands in stunned silence as Lord Cardell delivers the grim news. The nobleman admits his own uncertainty, explaining that multiple witnesses have come forward claiming to have seen Ange commanding monsters. The group reacts with collective disbelief, their faces etched with shock. Sana immediately jumps to her friend's defense, pointing out that Ange has been on a sacred pilgrimage and was even nearly killed by death ants during her travels. However, Cardell's expression only darkens, suggesting that these very facts are what complicate the matter. Continuing his explanation, the Lord reveals the cynical public perception. Many believe the attack by the death ants was merely a stage performance to deflect suspicion, especially since such creatures are never found in that region. He notes with a heavy heart that the reports of her alleged crimes ceased the moment she departed on her pilgrimage, making the timing look incredibly damning. He is suddenly interrupted when a maid bursts through the doors without knocking, startling everyone. Sana turns in surprise as the woman breathlessly apologizes for the intrusion, insisting that she has urgent information that could finally prove Ange's innocence. Before she can explain further, a man with a sharp gaze and a confident smirk follows her into the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. He addresses Ange directly by her full name, Ange Autumn, and informs her that the Adventurers Guild has officially issued an order of restriction against her. He watches her closely, his tone suggesting that he expects her full cooperation with the Guild's decree. The Guild official stands firm in the ornate hallway, his voice dripping with condescension as he informs the group that the Guild's decision is final, regardless of their status. He turns his sharp, calculating gaze toward the young woman he addresses as the Saintess, his smirk widening as he dismisses their concerns. Suddenly, the maid lunges forward with startling speed, her face a mask of protective fury as she declares her intent to neutralize the suspicious intruder. The sudden movement catches the rest of the group off guard, their eyes widening in shock as she closes the distance in a blur of motion. He effortlessly evades the strike, a small blade appearing in his hand as he mocks her ferocity, labeling her a truly terrifying servant. He remains entirely unperturbed, stating that his business is not with those sent to monitor the lady's movements, but with the lady herself. Despite his calm demeanor, the official is forced to keep moving as she continues her relentless assault, his frustration mounting as he demands she listen to reason. He insists there are specific circumstances at play that she is ignoring, even as he parries her strikes with practiced ease. As he prepares to counter, a shimmering hexagonal barrier erupts between them, halting his advance and leaving him momentarily stunned. The maid stares in disbelief at the sudden magical intervention that has effectively separated her from her target. The man shifts his focus to the young wizard standing nearby, realizing the boy was the one who deployed the defense magic with such impeccable timing. He is visibly impressed, questioning if such a feat of precision and speed was truly the work of a mere child. He notes the incredible speed and strength required to activate such magic instantly, concluding that the youth is far from ordinary. The young man simply nods, confirming the assessment with a steady, unwavering gaze that belies his youthful appearance. Nearby, the winged girl giggles, teasing that it is poor form to show off one's true power so casually. She boasts that even an ancient dragon has acknowledged his strength, despite his deceptively low level, leaving the young man looking quite flustered and embarrassed by the unwanted attention. Finally lowering his guard, the official introduces himself as Jean Dainsleif, claiming to be nothing more than a wandering adventurer of little consequence. The group watches him with a mix of annoyance and exhaustion, tired of the unnecessary theatrics and the chaos he has caused. He clarifies his true purpose, explaining that he has been tasked with observing the Saintess to ensure she adheres to her restrictions and to ultimately prove her innocence. The group listens in silence, the weight of their situation and the Guild's scrutiny settling heavily upon them. He continued his explanation, noting that while the long-term residents of Orlando were well acquainted with the Saintess, the Guild remained skeptical of the rumors claiming she was the one controlling the monsters. In response to this, the local lord added that because Orlando was a bustling trade hub protected by walls, many newcomers were unfamiliar with the true nature and purity of the woman they called Ange. The official, confirming his status as the Lord of Orlando, explained that the Guild's hand was forced by a wave of complaints from these outsiders, necessitating an investigation to preserve the peace. Despite the tension, the young woman with the dark wings calmly accepted the Guild's decree, ignoring her maid's frantic protests while her companion questioned if such observation would truly resolve the suspicions. He offered a smirk, assuring them that the Guild was an ally and he wouldn't be a constant shadow, though he couldn't resist a crude jest about verifying her innocence by peeking into her bath. Before the words could fully hang in the air, the maid had a blade pressed firmly against his throat, her eyes burning with a promise of death should he ever utter such vulgarity again. Once the situation was forced back into a semblance of order, the group gathered around a table to dissect the mystery, with the young scholar proposing that either a double was at work or the witnesses were fabricated. She delved deeper into the theory, explaining that while total physical mimicry was a forbidden taboo, simple illusions like changing hair color were well within the realm of possibility for a skilled mage. Her father offered a sheepish apology for his earlier outburst, prompting her to turn the focus back to the winged girl, asking if she had any inkling of what a criminal might hope to gain from these acts. The discussion was shattered when a servant burst into the room with a frantic cry, announcing that monsters had breached the walls of Orlando and were invading the city. He is instructed by Alice to leave Sanaa and Letitia behind for their safety, as the group prepares to move out to face the looming threat. As they depart, the two women watch them go, their expressions a mix of concern and duty as they remain at the rear of the formation. Moments later, he stands atop the defensive walls, commanding the forces to open fire as a massive magical blast illuminates the sky. Letitia marvels at the sheer power of the attack, noting that such strength is unexpected even for a master. She is visibly shaken, recalling how a previous flare blast directed at her was far more potent than any explosion magic she had ever encountered, despite her natural draconic resistance, which usually leaves her scales unscathed. Meanwhile, Alice maintains a serene, almost ethereal smile, expressing relief that the others are finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation, even as Haru remains skeptical of the strange atmosphere. His suspicions deepen as he overhears the soldiers discussing how the monster's rage intensified immediately following Letitia's return, seemingly confirming the dark rumors circulating among the populace that she is the cause of the chaos. Recognizing the need for vigilance, he and his companion agree to resume their patrol, the weight of the mystery pressing heavily upon them as they move through the city. During a brief lull, Alice confides her heartfelt desire to become a saintess, hoping to repay the kindness of the people and restore their faith even in the face of such overwhelming adversity. He remains lost in thought, his brow furrowed as he contemplates the identity of the mastermind behind these orchestrated attacks and what their ultimate objective could possibly be. Finally, he confers with Sanaa, who observes that the widespread belief in the rumors and the subsequent guilt felt by the citizens will make it nearly impossible to deliver their intended report without causing further social unrest. Alice explains her need to visit the Grand Temple to finalize a stage of her pilgrimage, though she admits she cannot leave just yet. Jean, the guild official, suggests that his presence would solve the problem, implying the guild's protection is sufficient for her to proceed. He immediately tries to intervene, insisting on accompanying them, but the official stops him. Jean reminds the group that the guild is an ally and that their involvement is already established, making additional guards unnecessary for the moment. The official then clarifies the specific nature of their arrangement, noting that the request he received was to monitor Ange, not to act as a personal guard for Alice. This distinction catches the young man off guard, forcing him to reconsider the guild's priorities. She voices her concern immediately, questioning if Alice would be left vulnerable if the guild's focus is elsewhere. Jean remains unmoved, stating bluntly that he is past the age of running around for free and won't perform tasks he hasn't been compensated for. The young man finds himself agreeing with this cold logic, acknowledging that adventuring is a profession, not a charity. Jean reinforces this, explaining that the entire lifestyle of an adventurer would collapse if they didn't receive proper rewards for their work. He then points out the irony in the youth's own actions, reminding him that during the pilgrimage, he had stepped in to slay monsters without ever mentioning a reward. Alice and Letitia watch the exchange, seeing the young man's visible embarrassment at being called out for his hidden altruism. He continues his blunt assessment, calling the lad interesting for possessing such immense magical power while lacking any self-awareness. He notes that despite the boy's attempts to sound detached and cold, his actions prove he is actually quite soft-hearted. He finally shrugs, deciding that as long as the boy tags along in the role of a guard, the arrangement should work out fine. The young man remains silent, processing the official's perspective on his own contradictory nature and the reality of their situation. The youth eventually concedes, noting that traveling with a large entourage of guards would draw too much unwanted attention and leave a poor impression. In response, Alice and Letitia suggest a compromise where Sanaa and the demon girl patrol the perimeter instead to keep a low profile. He is then pulled aside by the maid, who asks for a private moment of his time. Meanwhile, Letitia enthusiastically pledges to do her best on the patrol, her thoughts already drifting toward the prospect of a high-class meat dinner as a reward for her efforts. He stands with the maid, Sanaa, who shares her lingering doubts about the guild official. She explains that the guild purposefully chose someone with no ties to Orlando to ensure objectivity regarding Ange, yet she cannot shake a bad feeling about the man. She informs him that the Autumn household will conduct their own investigation into Jean's background. Following this warning, she bows low, her voice heavy with a solemn request. She implores him to protect her lady, Alice, entrusting her safety to his hands. Just as the weight of the request settles, the young lady herself appears, her face lighting up with a cheerful smile. She admits she wanted to see him one last time before he departed for his patrol, her lightheartedness a sharp contrast to the previous conversation. Her expression softens into one of concern as she asks if they can truly remain in Orlando until the cloud of suspicion over Ange is lifted. He looks away, the complexity of their situation weighing on him. He reflects on the nature of his work, acknowledging that while adventurers typically don't perform unpaid labor, this situation feels different. A harsh memory surfaces of a time when he was told he was useless and only allowed into the party out of pity. The words of the hero, Ange, sting even now. However, he pushes those thoughts aside, his resolve hardening. He realizes that there are now people who genuinely believe in him and depend on his strength, and he refuses to betray those expectations. Suddenly, she leans in close, teasingly calling him hopeless as she catches him lost in thought. The unexpected proximity leaves him flustered and wide-eyed. She continues, her voice gentle as she explains that it is precisely because of the kind of person he is that she wishes to travel by his side. She expresses a sincere desire to return the kindness he has shown her. With a determined fist and a bright smile, she declares their shared goal. They will find the true culprit behind these incidents. He watches her, a quiet sense of purpose reflecting in his eyes. The group stands before the towering spires of Orlando's Grand Temple, a structure of immense scale and intricate stonework. Haru gazes up in awe, while Jean explains that this central hub of faith draws pilgrims from across the land, serving as a beacon for the devout. Stepping inside, they are met by a woman with a piercing gaze and a heavy, ornate headdress. Ange's face lights up with relief and joy as she recognizes her old friend, Lona, who stands with a composed, almost distant air that contrasts with the warmth of the reunion. Because of the formal setting, Jean takes the lead in introductions, presenting Haru as the adventurer currently under his supervision. He speaks highly of the young man's strength and reliability, though Haru himself seems caught off guard and slightly embarrassed by the sudden praise in such a hallowed place. As the introductions continue, Ange elaborates on their shared past, explaining that she and Lona have been inseparable since they were small children, raised together within the very walls of this church. She proudly identifies Lona as the esteemed priestess of Orlando's Grand Temple, highlighting the importance of her role. In response to the warm greeting, she remains focused on her duties, extending a hand toward her old friend. She demands the official report of the completed pilgrimage, her tone leaving little room for idle chatter despite their long history. Upon taking her companion's hands, the priestess's expression shifts slightly as she senses a change. She notes that Ange's power has grown significantly since they last met, a revelation that Ange quietly confirms with a solemn nod. Despite the weight of the revelation, the meeting concludes with startling brevity. Lona turns away, stating she has pressing matters to attend to, leaving Haru to wonder if such a monumental journey really warranted such a simple and clinical report. While she walks away, a hidden tension grips her. She clenches her fist against her chest, her eyes shadowed by a private concern that she refuses to voice to her old friends, suggesting a burden she carries alone. Watching her departure, Haru remains puzzled by the cold reception and the abrupt end to their meeting. Jean breaks the silence, revealing a deeper layer to their connection by mentioning that the priestess is, in fact, his childhood friend as well, adding another layer of complexity to their reunion. This shared history weighs heavily on the young woman, who looks down with a wistful expression. She remembers the days when they were all just children, playing together without the burdens of titles, divine duty, or the growing distance between them. She recalls their shared childhood, remembering how Lona's singular ambition to become a priestess for Orlando led her to the temple every single day, a dedication they once shared as they studied side by side. Reflecting on those memories, the young apprentice realizes that the burden Lona carries as a full priestess is far heavier than her own duties, acknowledging that their diverging paths have created an unavoidable distance. She is pulled from her somber thoughts when he leans in, gently suggesting that despite the coldness of their first meeting, he hopes she and Lona will eventually find the chance to speak openly and mend their bond. She looks up at him with a soft, appreciative smile, whispering a heartfelt thank you for his intuition and the comfort his words provide in a moment of uncertainty. As the group begins to make their way across the vast temple courtyard to depart, they remain completely unaware of the silent, watchful figure observing their every move from the high stone balcony above. She stares down at them from her vantage point, her expression clouded with a bitter, lingering resentment as she watches the pair together, her mind consumed by a single, haunting question. Why does it always have to be him? Reports of monster attacks flood in, targeting the North Gate and the Eastern Watchtower. The relentless nature of these incursions is beginning to take a visible toll on the young man, who looks weary from days of constant vigilance. Beside him, the young woman with pale hair expresses her growing concern over the motive behind these coordinated strikes. Interrupting the grim discussion, the stoic maid enters the room, clutching a report. She confirms a troubling suspicion. An imposter has indeed been sighted, perfectly disguised as the winged hero to sow discord and confusion. This revelation is backed by a credible witness, a merchant with long-standing ties to the Autumn household, who swore under oath that the figure he saw was unmistakably the lady herself. Upon hearing this, the young man realizes the gravity of the situation, questioning if the culprits are utilizing the very magic they discussed to mimic her appearance so flawlessly. If true, the implications for their reputation and safety are dire. The maid elaborates on the nature of such taboo magic, warning that its misuse could plunge the entire world into chaos. She explains that because of its destructive potential, its practice is strictly monitored, and those who dare to wield it face the harshest of punishments. As the group considers the motive, a new theory emerges. Perhaps the goal is to force the winged hero out of the competition to become a saintess. They discuss the legend that only a few can achieve such a status, and some are even rumored to possess the power to bring the dead back to life. He is visibly stunned when the high priestess reveals a startling truth. Only one vacancy remains for the title of saintess. She notes that there are currently more than 10 other apprentices scattered across the land, all vying to complete their pilgrimages first. She muses that this scarcity of opportunity provides a clear motive for a rival apprentice to target the hero, hoping to eliminate the strongest competition. The guild official adds that the race is now a desperate sprint, as only the very next person to finish their journey will be recognized as the true saintess. Despite the logic, the young man remains skeptical, questioning whether someone capable of such dark deeds, controlling monsters, and dabbling in forbidden arts, could truly be considered a candidate for such a holy office. His concerns are met with boisterous laughter from the official, who finds the idea of an evil saintess to be an utter impossibility. While the priestess offers a sheepish apology for the lack of clarity, he can only sigh in frustration, feeling as though their investigation has led them right back to where they started. He watches as Letitia erupts in frustration, her wings and horns trembling with her shout. She declares the break over, insisting they return to patrol to catch the criminal and force them to reveal their true goal. Alice can only offer a soft, hesitant agreement in the face of such intensity. She walks alongside him, noticing how he chuckles softly while admitting that Sana might have been right about the situation. She nods in agreement, the tension of the previous outburst beginning to fade as they share this quiet moment. He places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his smile bright and confident. He promises her that everything will be okay and that they will definitely find a way to resolve the crisis, leaving her momentarily stunned by his unwavering optimism. Shortly after, she finds herself face-to-face with the guild official, Jean. He questions if she intends to simply stand around until the others return, prompting her to stammer that she will head back to her room. She is dismissed by the official with a wave and a smirk, as he notes that if she stays in her room, he won't have to bother monitoring her. She watches him go, a flicker of unease crossing her face at his casual attitude. Her growing discomfort is shared by Sana, who pulls her aside with a dark, intense expression. The maid sternly warns her never to be alone with that man, before reverting to her professional duties and asking her to call if she needs anything. Walking through the bustling halls alone, she observes the growing strain on the staff. She overhears frantic reports of personnel shortages in the relief squads and concerns about whether they can even afford to send food to the guards. Her footsteps echo softly as she continues down the corridor, her mind heavy with worry. She can't help but wonder what her father is doing amidst all this mounting chaos. Passing by another room, she catches snippets of more desperate requests, demands for increased guard funds to repair walls, and reports of a critical shortage of medicinal herbs. Finally, she reaches her father, who sits slumped in exhaustion, his hand pressed to his forehead. Despite the high priestess Lona's urging for him to rest, he refuses, his voice thick with desperation as he insists he must do everything he can while his daughter and Orlando remain in such grave danger. The high priestess stood silently, her back turned as she contemplated the unfolding chaos. Below, a hand with dark, sharpened nails flexed, its owner struggling to articulate the growing frustration within. She suddenly erupted into a frenzy of motion, her wings and horns ablur as she tore through the opposition. A nearby soldier watched in a cold sweat, marveling that while Haru was impressive, this young girl was nothing short of terrifying. Amidst the carnage, her only thought was a roar of indignation, questioning why she and her master were constantly being pulled apart. High atop the defensive walls, other guards felt a sense of relief, believing their proximity to such a powerhouse made their duty easy even under attack. Their complacency was short-lived, however, as one of them caught sight of an approaching figure and froze in sheer disbelief. The source of their shock was the sudden appearance of the high priestess herself, standing amidst the turmoil with an ethereal calm. The soldiers scrambled in confusion, unable to reconcile her presence with the fact that she was supposed to be elsewhere, and even more baffled by the monstrous companion accompanying her. Ignoring the panicked cries of the men around her, the winged girl sprinted down the vertical face of the stone wall with supernatural agility. Her eyes were locked onto her target, her determination manifesting as a fierce, predatory focus. She lunged forward with a strike aimed directly at the priestess, screaming a challenge to reveal her true identity. As the blow connected, the figure of the holy woman didn't bleed. Instead, her form began to crack and shatter like a hollow porcelain shell, proving the girl's suspicion that this was nothing more than a deceptive fake. The transformation formation shatters with a violent crack, sending shockwaves through the air. Amidst the chaos, the young hero is thrown back, her efforts to maintain the disguise failing as the magical energy dissipates into nothingness. She screams in pure, unadulterated frustration, her voice echoing across the stone courtyard. Having been so close to her goal, the failure is a bitter pill to swallow, and she can only wail in despair while the dragon's presence looms in her thoughts. High above on the tower's ramparts, the stoic maid watches the scene unfold with a sharp, calculating gaze. This failure is the definitive proof she needed. The girl currently under surveillance at the estate is an imposter, and with this vital information, she prepares to depart and deliver her report. Down on the cold stone floor, the young man groans as he tries to push himself up, his body aching from the sudden impact. He is startled when the maid appears beside him, her expression a mix of duty and concern as she mentions the reports of monsters manifesting in the area. The winged girl turns to them, her eyes wide and pleading, the weight of her perceived failure heavy on her shoulders. She desperately asks if there is anything at all, that she can do to make amends or provide assistance in the unfolding crisis. Her body trembles with the intensity of her resolve, her teeth gritted as she offers herself for any task, no matter how small or dangerous. The desperation in her voice is palpable, a raw display of her need to be useful and to atone for the trouble she believes she has caused. He can only press a hand to his forehead in exasperation as the situation spirals further out of control. Beside him, the hero is a mess of apologies and frantic energy, while the High Priestess's voice thunders through the air, demanding to know why she has appeared in such a reckless manner. The High Priestess stands with her head bowed, the weight of the political fallout visible in her slumped shoulders. She laments that this is the worst possible outcome, explaining that the girl's presence near the monster sightings has only served to deepen the suspicions they were so close to clearing. She shrinks back under the weight of the scolding, her wings drooping as she offers a small, whispered apology. The realization that her well-intentioned actions have only made things harder for her friends is a crushing blow to her spirit. Tears well up in her eyes and spill down her flushed cheeks as she finally breaks down, her voice trembling with emotion. She confesses that she couldn't bear the thought of everyone suffering because of her, and that her only desire was to help in some way, even if her methods were misguided. She hangs her head, her voice trembling as she offers a sincere apology for the trouble she believes she has caused everyone. Haru, however, immediately interjects, telling her that her perspective is wrong and that she shouldn't carry that burden. He reaches out and takes her hands in his, looking her directly in the eye with a firm but kind expression. He explains that the hardships they are facing are the fault of the criminal behind the incidents, not hers, and he insists that she must not blame herself even if they were to get hurt. This reassurance strikes a deep chord within her, leaving her momentarily speechless as she processes his unwavering support. The young man offers a warm, genuine smile, reinforcing his words by telling her that the reason they are all working so hard is simply because she is important to them. Beside them, Alice watches the exchange with a gentle, knowing look, glad to see her friend being comforted. Suddenly, the moment is broken as he staggers, a hand flying to his forehead as a wave of dizziness and heat washes over him. Sana rushes to his side in a panic, fearing his fever has returned, while Letitia looks on in wide-eyed alarm. He manages to steady himself after a few moments, shaking off the lingering haze and refocusing his attention on the task at hand. Turning back to the young hero, he inquires about the throwing knives the criminal used, asking if she could show them to him as evidence. Her face pales as the realization hits her. She admits with a frantic cry that she left the crucial evidence behind, bowing her head in shame. She is instantly consumed by a dark cloud of gloom, her spirit crushed by this latest oversight. Seeing the need for movement, Sana urges the group to hurry back to the estate, prompting a dejected response from the girl. As they begin to make their way back, he remains quiet for a moment before turning his gaze toward the diligent maid walking beside him. He prefaces his next thought by admitting it might sound strange, catching her attention as she wonders what could be on his mind. He then asks her directly why she is pushing herself so hard, a question that causes her to pause and look up at him with a mix of surprise and introspection, as if she hadn't considered the depth of her own efforts until now. She stands in stunned silence as Haru presses her for an explanation. He questions why she is pushing herself so hard, noting that she has no personal stake in their current predicament. Despite her constant grumbling, she had remained diligent in her patrols, and her visible frustration at their failure to apprehend the culprit reveals a level of commitment that confuses him. Before she can offer a rebuttal, Letitia interjects with infectious energy, leaning in to ask if Sana has been a good girl and a diligent worker. Haru is momentarily caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone, but he feels a wave of relief seeing Letitia's spirits have returned. Meanwhile, the maid's cheeks flush with a sudden warmth, her eyes wide with the unexpected possibility of receiving genuine praise. Yielding to the playful atmosphere, he reaches out to gently pat Letitia's head, prompting a squeal of pure delight from the girl as she begs for more. She basks in the affection, her usual intensity replaced by a moment of sheer, unadulterated joy. Watching the exchange from the side, Sana softly calls out to him, her voice barely a whisper as she witnesses the bond between them. The light-hearted moment fades as Letitia's expression grows uncharacteristically somber, her gaze fixed on him as she asks if he understands the nature of a dragon's birth. He tentatively suggests they come from eggs, a fact she confirms with a heavy nod. She explains the grueling reality of their kind. The hatching process is a slow, uncertain ordeal that can span years or even decades, fraught with the risk of failure. As she speaks, a memory of her earliest moments surfaces, a tiny, fragile creature emerging from its shell into the oppressive silence of a desolate cavern. She reveals the stark loneliness of her beginning, having entered the world entirely alone, with no one to greet her in the darkness of that cave. The small dragon wanders through the dense forest, its large eyes darting around in fear. It startles at a sudden noise, its tiny body tensing before it slumps, a profound sense of isolation washing over it as it realizes it is truly alone. It stares blankly ahead, the weight of its solitude becoming an almost physical burden. The silence of the woods is deafening, echoing the simple, painful truth that it has no one to turn to. Recalling a time when it sought companionship, the creature remembers approaching a human settlement with hope, only to be met with screams of terror and calls for its execution. The memory of being hunted and rejected by those it merely wanted to watch from afar brings fresh tears to its eyes. Now in her humanoid form, she hides her face in her hands, mortified by the memory of her younger, more arrogant self. She recounts how she used to demand tribute and fear as the legendary ancient dragon, a facade born of a desperate need for any kind of connection, even one based on intimidation. Her expression shifts from embarrassment to a fierce, protective anger as she declares her refusal to forgive anyone who would cause the saintess pain. She emphasizes how much the city and her father cherish the young woman, her eyes burning with a sense of justice that the young man beside her finds both surprising and intense. He reaches out, gently patting her head in a gesture of comfort that catches her completely off guard. Her anger evaporates instantly, replaced by a blissful, dazed expression as she leans into the touch, proving to him that beneath her draconic bluster, she is simply a child seeking warmth. Suddenly snapping back to reality, she begins to panic about the late hour, fearing the reprimand she will surely receive from the head maid. When asked about her relationship with the stern attendant, she admits that while she cares for her, the woman's intensity when she is carried away is genuinely frightening. She prepares to depart, her duty calling her back to the manor as the night deepens. He watches her go, mentioning that the saintess had expressed a desire to investigate something further, a detail that lingers in the air as they part ways. Meanwhile, within the quiet halls of the estate, the young boy stands in contemplation as the head maid tends to her mistress. She encourages the weary saintess to find rest after the day's taxing events, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating a moment of fragile peace. She looks down at the young boy, her voice soft as she asks if he is still upset about her secret departure earlier that day. Nine remains silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, the tension between them palpable in the quiet room. He finally speaks, his voice trembling with a mix of sadness and resentment. He admits that her silence made him feel like a servant who wasn't worthy of her trust, a realization that clearly stings both of them as he reflects on his place in her life. Without another word, the boy turns and flees the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Left alone in the sudden silence, she clutches at her chest, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her as she wonders if she truly possesses the qualities required of a saintess. Her mind drifts back to a brighter time within the hallowed halls of the cathedral, where a familiar, energetic voice called out her name. It was Lona, rushing toward her with a face full of joy upon hearing the news of her selection as a saintess candidate, the grand architecture of their home framing the moment. The dark-skinned girl threw her arms around her in a jubilant embrace, her excitement infectious enough to momentarily banish any shadows. Even though she had only achieved the rank of apprentice herself, her pride in her friend's accomplishment was boundless and sincere. With a radiant smile, the apprentice credited her own progress to their bond, confessing that she had worked hard to keep pace with the person she admired most. She then revealed her own surprising news. She had been recommended to become the next priestess, a revelation that left her friends stunned and humbled. They stood hand in hand, a silent pact forming between them in the light of the cathedral. Despite her lingering self-doubt, she felt bolstered by her friends' unwavering faith as they promised to give their all for the future of Orlando together. Now, tucked beneath the heavy blankets of her bed in the present, those memories offer a bittersweet comfort. She clings to the echo of that encouragement, trying to convince herself that everything will eventually be all right, even as the darkness of the room closes in. Yet, the shadows of her recent failures loom large, reminding her of the anxiety that once consumed her and the pain she caused to those she held dear. She finds herself questioning if the person she has become is someone her old friend would even recognize, or if she has strayed too far from the path they once envisioned. Outside, under the cold light of the moon, a lone traveler approaches the looming silhouette of the castle. Inside, she remains lost in her thoughts, her heart aching with a desperate wish for the guidance of the friend she left behind, wondering what she should do next. She was not the only one grappling with the weight of the past. Elsewhere, a heavy door creaked open as Jean stepped into a dimly lit room. He offered a casual greeting to the hooded figure waiting within, his tone light despite the gravity of their situation. He maintained a smirk, reminding her that he was the one who had rescued her and suggesting a bit more gratitude was in order. She, however, was not in the mood for pleasantries, pointedly noting that he was also the one responsible for the knives thrown during their earlier encounter. The man dismissed her coldness with a confident chuckle, assuring her that their scheme was progressing perfectly. He explained that they only needed to wait until the public's faith in the saintess began to crumble, his eyes gleaming with a calculated malice as he thanked her for her role in the deception. As he turned to leave, he issued a stern warning that the plan had reached its final, most critical stage and could not afford any mistakes. She remained still, her face hidden in the shadows of her hood, curtly replying that such a reminder was unnecessary. Her eyes burned with a cold, unwavering intensity as the door closed, leaving her alone with her thoughts. A deep-seated resentment twisted her features into a mask of hatred as she vowed that she would never, under any circumstances, forgive Ange for what had transpired. The hooded woman stares ahead with a cold intensity, her goal clear, to force Ange from her position as saintess and trigger the total collapse of Orlando. Beside her, Jean offers a smirk, expressing his gratitude for the assistance her group has provided in this endeavor. She remains unimpressed by his pleasantries, her patience wearing thin as she demands to know when their plan will finally be set into motion. He assures her that the long-awaited orders have at last arrived. He leans in, detailing the treachery to come. Tomorrow night, in the heart of Orlando, she is to summon every monster at her command while maintaining the guise of the saintess herself. The man gestures confidently, noting that there are many ways to dismantle a city from within, even as his companion questions the likelihood of their success. He points out that the seeds of doubt have already been sown, with many citizens already suspecting a fraud is in their midst. He elaborates on the coming chaos, explaining how the populace will fracture. Those convinced of the saintess's guilt will mock the believers as fools, while the faithful will brand the skeptics as traitors, all while the truth remains hidden in the shadows. As he rants about the inherent greed and foul nature of humanity, the woman cuts him off, dismissing his philosophical ramblings as irrelevant to the task at hand. Unbeknownst to the conspirators, the priestess crouches just outside the window, her face pale as she absorbs every word of their dark design. Later, she recounts the horrifying discovery to her companions, her voice trembling with disbelief at the sheer scale of the betrayal she witnessed. When questioned about her presence at the scene, she attributes her timely intervention to a sudden intuition, though she admits it was Haru who first sensed the underlying deception. She had been recounting the events that transpired when the group went to report their findings at the church. Haru listened intently, his gaze lowered as he processed the weight of her words and the implications for their mission. During that meeting, Jean had behaved as if he and the mysterious hooded woman were complete strangers. However, his forced indifference only served to heighten the suspicion that the two were deliberately hiding a pre-existing connection, a performance that did not go unnoticed. He had even shown a surprising lack of concern when the saintess candidate slipped away from his watch. Despite the fact that failing his duty would cost him his reward, he remained unervingly calm, suggesting that the coin was never his true objective. Because of these red flags, the priestess had decided to dig deeper into his background while keeping a close eye on his movements. The investigation yielded chilling results. The man claiming to be a wandering adventurer was actually a mercenary who specialized in the most depraved underworld dealings, a fact she now shared with her colleagues. His history was a dark ledger of scheming, torture, and assassination. It became clear that his appointment to monitor the lady was no coincidence, but rather a calculated step in a much larger, more sinister plot that involved things too disgusting to even speak of. A cold smirk played on his lips as he maneuvered himself into position. Every action he took was a deliberate move to ensure his infiltration was successful, all to bring his hidden plan to fruition within the city of Orlando. In response to these revelations, the young dragon girl bristled with indignation, her fangs bared as she demanded they take immediate action. She argued that they should simply capture the mercenary and force the truth out of him, though Haru remained cautious, wondering why such a dangerous man had set his sights on their city in the first place. Anja's face is contorted with a chilling, hollow smile that leaves Lona trembling in disbelief. The betrayal feels palpable as the words they once shared now seem like hollow lies, casting a dark shadow over their shared history. Desperate to bridge the growing rift, the young man seizes her hands, his grip firm as he implores her to speak honestly with Lona. He refuses to believe the girl he knew has vanished entirely behind this mask of malice. He continues his plea, his voice softening as he suggests that perhaps she is merely a pawn in Jean's games, or that a grave misunderstanding has clouded her judgment. He begs her to find her composure and talk, hoping to reach the friend he once trusted. Yet, the memory of her cold steel against his throat and that same manic glint in her eyes haunts him, making his words feel like a fragile shield against a looming, inexplicable threat. Later, as he stands with Lona, the weight of the situation settles heavily upon them. When she asks for their next move, he finds himself unable to offer the simple comfort of blind faith in a childhood friend, his own doubts gnawing at his resolve. Within the cold, towering spires of the cathedral, a new player enters the shadows. A mysterious figure approaches the priestess, their presence heralded by a cryptic offer to listen to a plan that could change everything. The priestess recoils in horror, finding herself on the cold stone floor beside the lifeless body of a man bristling with daggers. Jean sits nearby, his tone disturbingly casual as he claims to have intercepted an assassin meant for her life. He sneers at her confusion, mocking her ignorance of the deadly games being played within these holy walls. The word assassin echoes in her mind, a sharp, terrifying contrast to the sanctity of her surroundings. The bearded man leans in, weaving a web of suspicion by claiming that Ange herself hired the killer. He points out the convenient distance between them, suggesting that the more the priestess dedicated herself to her duties, the more the saintess candidate retreated into the shadows to plot. His lips curl into a predatory grin as he leaves her with a final, poisonous command: to search her memories and find the truth hidden in the gaps of her service, forcing her to question everything she thought she knew. His words echo in the priestess's mind, planting seeds of doubt about the true nature of her friendship with Ange. She envisions a darker side of the saintess candidate, a version of Ange that seems to revel in deception and hidden malice. He continues his psychological assault, questioning the wisdom of elevating Lona to the role of priestess and subtly flattering the woman before him by suggesting Lona is an inferior choice. The man scoffs at Lona's perceived simplicity, asserting that her lack of wit makes her the perfect, unwitting tool for their plans. He delivers a crushing prediction, claiming that once Lona ascends to the priesthood, she will find herself utterly alone and unloved by those around her. Overwhelmed by the weight of these revelations, the priestess collapses, her mind racing as she struggles to reconcile this new information with her memories of Ange. He kneels beside her, maintaining his facade of a concerned ally while revealing that he acts on behalf of an anonymous benefactor who uncovered Ange's supposed treachery. Meanwhile, at a grand estate, the atmosphere is far less dire as Sanaa boisterously demands more food from Nine, much to Alice's chagrin, while a mysterious offer of revenge against Ange hangs in the air. At the breakfast table, Haru offers his apologies for the morning's disruptions while the group coordinates their upcoming patrol duties. Their meal is suddenly interrupted by a frantic messenger bearing the news that the woman impersonating Ange has surrendered herself to the guild and is currently being detained in the town's dungeon. Haru and the hooded woman walk through the bustling town square. Rumors swirl among the townspeople about a criminal who surrendered after impersonating the Saintess candidate, Ange. She feels a wave of relief, her eyes narrowing as she reflects on the news. To her, it was impossible that the real Ange would ever commit such acts, confirming her suspicions that something was amiss. Driven by a sudden urgency, she sprints toward a wooden structure, her footsteps echoing against the ground. She calls out for Jean, her voice laced with confusion and desperation as she demands to know why he would suddenly give himself up. Inside, the bearded man stands with a heavy, contemplative expression, his mind racing through the possibilities. He wonders if this turn of events is a calculated move by others to seize glory, or if it's a hidden layer of a much larger, more dangerous plan that must be addressed. In response to the unfolding chaos, she declares her intent to infiltrate the guild's dungeon to find the truth. Jean immediately insists on joining her, brushing off her protest that his presence isn't necessary for the task at hand. Her gaze turns cold and intense, fueled by a simmering rage against those who have orchestrated this situation. She mutters about her inability to forgive them, questioning why she should hesitate to remove anyone who stands in her path. He pauses for a moment, adjusting his stance as he considers the weight of their current predicament. It occurs to him that the influence of a certain suggestion might have been far more potent than he had initially anticipated. Moments later, the two of them arrive at the iron bars of the dungeon, peering into the dimly lit cell. The silhouette of a captive figure sits silently within the stone walls, awaiting their confrontation. They stand before the prisoner, demanding answers for the charade. She points out that they both know the person behind the bars isn't the actual criminal, questioning the motive behind such a blatant deception. Jean explains his involvement as a necessity to clear the obstacles in their way, his tone blunt and pragmatic. Beside him, the hooded woman grows increasingly frustrated by the prisoner's lack of response, demanding to know why they remain so stubbornly silent. She looms over the prisoner, her face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage as she warns against any unnecessary actions. Her voice is a low growl, declaring that the right of vengeance against Ange belongs solely to her. Below, the young man watches the exchange, his expression unreadable as he acknowledges her words. Suddenly, the heavy atmosphere is shattered by the arrival of the priestess, who steps into the light with a confident, almost playful smile. She suggests that perhaps it is time for a full confession, catching both the bearded man and the hooded woman completely off guard. Their shock is palpable as they realize their clandestine meeting has been compromised. Standing beside the priestess, the young man remains calm, flanked by his companions as he stares down the intruders. The bearded man's face pales, the realization dawning on him that they have walked straight into a carefully laid trap. With a cool, level gaze, the youth asks if the situation even requires further explanation. He continues, his tone conversational yet firm, admitting a slight pang of guilt for the deception used to lure them here. However, he quickly counters this by reminding them of their own treacherous attempts to frame Ange, suggesting that their current predicament is merely a balancing of the scales. As the group gathers, Lona watches the hooded woman with a look of profound sadness and confusion. The priestess explains their strategy, noting that a direct confrontation and immediate delivery to the guild might have silenced them before they could reveal the truth. Stepping forward, Lona directly addresses the woman, her voice trembling with a mix of betrayal and desperation. She questions why someone who once spoke of working together for the future of Orlando and helping Ange become a true saintess would turn to such dark methods. The woman recoils as if struck, her hands flying to her head as she struggles with an internal torment. She screams for silence, her voice cracking under the weight of a long-simmering resentment that seems to be boiling over. Her despair turns into a venomous outburst as she declares her hatred for Orlando and everyone within it. She roars that the city and everything it stands for should be utterly destroyed, her eyes wide with a terrifying, singular focus on annihilation. Before anyone can react to her declaration, a violent surge of dark energy erupts from her position, shattering the surrounding structures. The young man and his allies are thrown back by the sheer force of the blast, their faces etched with shock at the sudden escalation. From the swirling shadows and smoke, a monstrous, pitch-black entity rises, its form towering and indistinct with glowing, narrow eyes. The young man can only stare in horror, his voice a mere whisper as he demands to know what kind of nightmare has been unleashed. Chaos erupts as a monstrous shadow with jagged teeth lunges from the darkness. Haru reacts instantly, shielding Ange and shouting for her to retreat as she cries out in terror. High above, a winged figure is pulled into a swirling black vortex that has torn through the sky. Haru and Sana reach out in desperation, their voices lost to the wind as they scream Lona's name. She turns back, her expression fierce with a mix of rage and worry, insisting they must pursue her friend immediately. However, the priority shifts. They must first deal with the muscle doll responsible for this madness. He merely smirks, a cold, mocking sound escaping his lips as he prepares his next move. Recognizing the threat, Sana shouts a warning for the others to stay back, just as he hurls a small, spherical device toward them. The device detonates in a cloud of stinging pepper smoke, sending the group into a coughing fit. Amidst the haze, Haru realizes their assailant has used the distraction to vanish, and he urgently urges a reeling Sana to get back on her feet. Elsewhere in the city, the nightmare spreads as monstrous silhouettes prowl the streets. A young boy watches in paralyzed horror, unable to comprehend how such creatures could have penetrated so deep into the heart of the town. They quickly gather their bearings, the priestess and her attendants joining Haru to assess the escalating crisis. With the city under siege, they coordinate a plan to split up and defend the various districts, from the Lord's mansion in the east to the gates in the west. She stands trembling with a dark, vengeful aura, her patience finally snapping as she declares her intent to level the entire city of Orlando. Haru and the priestess exchange a look of alarm, with the latter sternly reminding him that magic is strictly forbidden within the city walls. She then turns her scrutiny toward him, questioning the whereabouts of the sword he had used to protect her previously. He stammers, caught off guard, explaining that he can't simply discharge the weapon's power at will. He continues his frantic explanation, admitting he only carried the blade as a loophole when his fire magic was banned, and thus hadn't thought to bring it today. The priestess offers no words, only a long, piercing stare of utter disbelief. She suggests a strategy to minimize collateral damage, focusing on achieving the greatest possible power within the smallest physical range. Haru agrees, realizing that such a concentrated approach might be their only viable option. Suddenly, he begins to channel an intense, swirling energy between his palms, causing her and the dragon girl to recoil in sheer shock. She frantically reminds him that casting magic is a severe violation of the city's laws, but the process is already underway. Ignoring the warning, he visualizes the mana as a complex puzzle, meticulously shifting its shape and pulling the density together to prevent the volatile structure from crumbling under its own weight. With a final mental push, a blade of pure, roaring fire erupts from his hand, a manifestation he calls his flare sword. He immediately lunges at the encroaching monsters, while the two onlookers watch in a mix of awe and terror, never having seen or heard of such a spell in all their lives. The flaming blade cuts through the beasts with effortless precision, and he finds himself surprised by how natural and effective the weapon feels in his grip. Stunned by the display, she demands to know if he truly just invented a brand new spell in a single instant, to which he can only offer a sheepish, uncertain confirmation that he did. While the dragon girl trembles, fearing he might be a demon lord in disguise, the official explains that developing spells usually takes years of study, making his casual creation utterly bizarre and unprecedented. Shaking off the shock, she declares that they must move toward the central district and the Grand Temple immediately to continue their search. She notes that according to reports from the townspeople, the monster flew in that exact direction, meaning Lona is likely being held somewhere within the temple grounds. She admits that while she lacks the strength for direct combat, she cannot simply stand by. Haru and Sana listen intently as she struggles with her own limitations, her voice trailing off as she searches for the right words to express her resolve. Her resolve hardens as she thinks of Lona, her precious childhood friend. The need to save her outweighs any fear she might have, and she declares with absolute certainty that she must be the one to stop whatever is happening. Inspired by this conviction, and steps forward, her voice steady as she vows never to leave anyone behind again. Beside her, Alice and Nine offer their unwavering support, their faces reflecting a shared sense of duty and loyalty to their lady. She turns to the young boy, asking if he is willing to join them on this dangerous path. Though initially taken aback, Nine's hesitation vanishes, replaced by a determined smile as he gives his word to stand by her side, prompting Haru to signal the start of their journey. With their spirits united, the group raises a collective cry of defiance. They set off together, their footsteps heavy with purpose as they leave the safety of their surroundings behind to face the trials ahead. The bearded official observes the unfolding chaos with a cold detachment, noting that while the original plan went awry, the end result remains favorable. He remarks on the priestess's final, desperate act, the summoning of a truly formidable monster. This creature is an archdemon, a high-ranking entity possessing absolute resistance to magic. It stands as the natural predator of any wizard, its dark, amorphous form absorbing all light and rendering standard spells useless. Watching the struggle, the scarred swordsman mocks the young wizard, questioning what his next move could possibly be. Nearby, Letitia lunges at a snarling, wolf-like beast, her blades flashing in a double-slash technique that barely grazes the creature's thick hide. She finds herself increasingly overwhelmed as the beast's ferocity intensifies. The realization that her current strength might not be enough begins to take hold as she struggles to parry a heavy, crushing blow. Despite the mounting pressure and the creature's overwhelming power, she refuses to back down, shouting her defiance. She is determined to prove that she can handle the threat on her own, pushing her body to its limits. Yet, a nagging doubt lingers in her mind as she considers her status as a mere level 22 swordsman with no extraordinary abilities. She compares her modest skills to Haru's hidden potential, feeling like nothing more than an average adventurer in his shadow. This insecurity transforms into a fierce, protective instinct as she resolves to no longer be timid. She decides she must shield Haru at all costs, fearing that his immense magical power will only lead others to exploit or abuse him if his true strength is revealed. Meanwhile, Haru recalls the many constraints placed upon him, remembering how he was always relegated to a support role. He reflects on how he was forbidden from using his magic and often forced to wait outside during important missions, never allowed to truly fight. The truth of those restrictions finally dawns on him with startling clarity. Letitia wasn't trying to suppress his growth or hold him back. She was desperately trying to protect him from a world that would seek to use him. This sentiment is echoed in a quiet conversation elsewhere, where it is confirmed that his strength was intentionally kept a secret. The goal was to ensure that those who would exploit Haru's power would never discover the true extent of his capabilities. Sana stands before the beasts, her mind racing with the realization that Letitia's harshness toward Haru was a shield, not a weapon. She finally understands that the pain inflicted was a desperate attempt to protect him from a far worse fate. She brushes off the monster's feeble attempts at intimidation, her expression shifting from contemplation to a sharp, predatory annoyance. With a dismissive glare, she warns them that their time is up and it is now her turn to strike. With a sudden burst of speed, she vaults into the air, her small frame a blur as she descends upon the towering reptiles. A wicked grin spreads across her face as she plunges toward her prey, her claws ready to tear through their scales. Moments later, she stands amidst a pile of defeated creatures, her heart swelling with pride. She envisions a grand victory where Jean, her master, showers her with praise, calling her his most prized student while she basks in the glory of her success. She skips away from the carnage, her spirits high and her resolve renewed. With a cheerful skip, she vows to keep working hard, her mind already set on the next challenge. Elsewhere, a dark, towering silhouette looms over the cathedral, its clawed hands clutching the small, limp form of Ange as it surveys the silent stone walls. Haru stares into the distance, his eyes devoid of light, and his face a mask of cold indifference to the world around him. He watches as the city of Orlando is consumed by flames, questioning if this destruction truly constitutes the revenge he sought. He wonders if the burning of the city that used and discarded him brings the closure he needs. The weight of his past bears down on him, a bitter reminder of a life spent being ignored by everyone except when they had bothersome responsibilities to cast upon his shoulders. He reflects on how he was treated as a mere tool, forced into the role of a priestess and burdened with duties that no one else wanted to handle. He walked through the vaulted stone corridors of the church, his brow furrowed in deep anxiety. The day's lessons had been grueling, and the weight of the thick tome in his arms felt like the weight of his entire future. If his performance didn't improve, the threat of expulsion loomed over him like a dark cloud, and he feared he might be kicked out of the church entirely. Stopping beneath a grand archway, he stared blankly ahead, paralyzed by indecision and wondering what he should do. Seeking a moment of peace, he wandered into the sun-drenched courtyard, only to find a young girl fast asleep amidst the grass with a small bird for company. His presence must have startled her, for she suddenly bolted upright with a piercing shriek that sent him reeling back in shock. As the initial panic subsided, he looked at her messy light-toned hair and realized he had seen her before in the chapel, though her name escaped him. She quickly apologized, her face flushing with embarrassment as she explained that she had simply drifted off while trying to study. He pointed out that there were dedicated study rooms for such things, but his tone was more curious than accusatory as he acknowledged the truth in her simple explanation. With a bright, infectious smile, she gestured to the warm grass, remarking on how pleasant the sun felt. She then extended an unexpected invitation, asking if he would like to join her and study together right there in the open air. Soon, the two were side by side, their books spread out before them. To his surprise, her perspective made the difficult passages finally click into place, and though he found her behavior a bit peculiar, he couldn't deny the progress they were making together. During a brief lull in their work, she turned to him with a friendly grin and asked for his name. He introduced himself as Lona, and in return, she introduced herself as Ange, her cheerful demeanor never wavering as she welcomed him. As they continued to talk, he opened up about the stakes of his education, explaining that as an orphan with nowhere else to go, his scholarship was his only lifeline. If his grades slipped, he would lose his place in the dorms and his path to becoming a priestess would be severed, leaving him with nothing. Her expression shifted to one of fierce determination, her eyes wide as she declared that she wouldn't let him leave. She insisted that they both give their absolute best to their studies, bound by a new, shared purpose to succeed together. She had offered him a glimmer of hope, and as he looked up at her, a faint blush colored his cheeks. For the first time in a long while, a genuine, albeit shy, smile touched his lips, the weight of his academic failures momentarily lifted by her kindness. But that warmth was fleeting. He watched from the shadows as she turned her attention away, laughing and conversing easily with the high-ranking officials of the church. The distance between them felt vast, a reminder of his own precarious position compared to her effortless grace. She seemed so at home among the elders, her bright spirit drawing them in. He could only look on in confusion, questioning why someone like her would ever bother with a struggling student like him. The disparity in their worlds was becoming painfully clear. His heart grew heavy as he recalled her promise. She had said they would face their challenges together, that they would both strive for success. Now, those words felt hollow, echoing in his mind as he stood alone, the shadow of doubt beginning to take root. Years later, that doubt has curdled into a poisonous rage. The boy who once blushed at a kind word is gone, replaced by a man consumed by the shadows of betrayal. He snarls the word, liar, under his breath, his eyes burning with a cold, murderous intent. The memory of her supposed friendship is now a fuel for his vengeance. He is convinced she used him, tricked him, and he vows that his revenge will not be complete until he has taken her life. The group stands before a heavy door, with 9 warning that the roof lies just beyond. Inch calls out to the boy who was once her friend, but he stands shrouded in shadows, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. He ignores her pleas, raising a hand to manifest a sphere of volatile dark energy. Seeing the imminent danger, Nine throws herself in front of the young girl, shouting a desperate warning for her mistress to stay back. The girl continues to beg him to stop, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. From beneath his hood, he sneers at her desperation, dismissing her cries for mercy as nothing more than a pathetic attempt to save her own life. Tears well in her eyes as she denies his accusations, insisting she never harbored the dark thoughts he attributes to her. Her words only fuel his rage. He roars for her to be silent, convinced that he has finally seen through her facade to the cruel person he believes lies beneath. While the confrontation escalates, Nine observes the toll the battle is taking, noting that the mistress's mana is nearly depleted from the strain of controlling the monstrous horde. She realizes that the boy's current state is likely the result of a mental suggestion, a dark influence that could prove fatal if his energy is completely spent. She takes decisive action, unleashing a searing flare blast to create an opening. The boy, however, remains unfazed, swatting the magical assault aside with a contemptuous remark about the futility of her efforts. Undeterred, the maid explains that such mental manipulations take root in the cracks of a person's heart. She instructs the girl to continue reaching out to him, hoping to break the spell while she focuses on draining the remaining mana from their true adversary. The girl redoubles her efforts, calling his claims of her being a fake a lie. She speaks of the profound loneliness she felt before his arrival, a confession that causes him to falter, his certainties beginning to crumble. She begins to recount their shared history, reminding him of the simple moments they spent together in the church courtyard and the meals they shared. He struggles against the influx of memories, his mind reeling as he tries to reconcile these peaceful images with his current hatred. As she speaks of shopping trips and the matching crosses they chose together, the dark aura surrounding him begins to dissipate. The weight of their shared past, the pancakes Nine made, and the quiet days of companionship, finally begins to pierce through the darkness clouding his mind. He stares in wide-eyed disbelief as the girl before him continues her desperate plea. She reminds him of the day she received the revelation to become a saintess, questioning if he wasn't the one who had been the most joyful for her success. The weight of these forgotten memories strikes him like a physical blow, shattering the false reality he had been living. As his mind fractures under the strain of the truth, the massive shadow looming behind them begins to waver and dissolve. He loses his footing, his strength failing him, but she is there to catch him before he hits the ground, her voice filled with frantic concern as she calls out his name. She looks down at him, her expression shifting from panic to a dazed confusion. When he weakly utters her name, she seems to snap out of a fog, blinking as if seeing the world clearly for the first time in an eternity. Around them, their companions rush forward, their voices a cacophony of worry and relief as they demand to know what has happened to the saintess. Their reunion is cut short by a sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere as the towering entity above them begins to crumble into nothingness. The realization ripples through the group. The dark influence that had been tethering the beast to this world has finally snapped. Without its master's mana to sustain it, the creature is vanishing, leaving them standing in the wake of a broken spell. Lona and Letitia walk through the cathedral halls, the weight of recent events still heavy in the air. Letitia mentions that while Lona has been busy with questioning, they should at least find time to eat together. But as they approach his quarters, a loud commotion echoes from ahead. Because of the noise, they find Ange in a state of total panic, her composure completely shattered. She wails about her inability to be a priestess, declaring her resignation at the top of her lungs while the others look on in stunned silence, unable to calm her down. Moments later, the outburst subsides, and she stands before the door with a woven basket in hand. She calls his name softly, her previous tantrum replaced by a shy, lingering hesitation. She explains that Nine prepared some pancakes, remembering his fondness for them from their younger days. The simple, domestic gesture of kindness catches him off guard, momentarily softening the tension of the day's trials. Later, the group gathers in the sun-drenched courtyard to share the meal together. While the others converse at the table, Sanaa wonders aloud why Lona and Ange have drifted slightly apart from the rest of the gathering, sensing a private conversation unfolding. He takes a large bite of the treat, his eyes widening as the familiar flavor hits his tongue. He confirms it is truly delicious, much to her visible delight and relief. The flavor brings back a flood of memories from their childhood. He recalls how Nine would always prepare these snacks whenever he visited to play, a small, sweet constant in their shared past. As they sit together by the stone fountain, they laugh about the times they were so engrossed in play that they neglected their studies and faced the consequences. However, the lighthearted mood shifts as he prepares to address the serious reality of her situation. She shares the news that the authorities have officially deemed her a victim of the recent events. Since she was under external control and has no memory of using the forbidden arts, she will not face any charges and can return to her life as it was before. Despite her relief, a dark shadow crosses his face as he stares into the distance. He knows the truth of the taboo magic she wielded, and a chilling realization takes hold. There is no way things can ever truly be okay again. He is tormented by the weight of his actions, unable to simply return to a life of blissful ignorance as a priestess. The memory of the harm he caused others haunts him, and he questions why he was so easily swayed by the suggestion that had clouded his mind. Looking down with a heavy heart, he confesses that when Jean questioned the depth of their friendship, he found himself unable to offer an immediate answer. He acknowledges that while she truly views him as a companion, his own feelings have been far more complicated and fraught with doubt. In the quiet moments they shared in the past, he admits that a sense of distance always lingered between them, a gap he felt he could never quite bridge. He goes as far as to label himself a terrible person, revealing that his initial pursuit of her friendship was born of a selfish desire to succeed in his studies and find a sense of belonging, rather than genuine affection. Standing with his back turned, he explains the fear that gripped him, the constant worry that she would eventually see through his facade and realize he was never worthy of being her friend. A heavy silence falls between them as she processes his confession, her gaze shifting from the ground back to him with a new intensity. Suddenly, she lunges forward and grasps him, her face lighting up with an unexpected joy because he is finally being honest about his feelings. She insists that his words have broken the lingering spell of the suggestion, and she is genuinely happy to hear his truth. She beams at him, explaining that she had always tried to emulate his strength to cheer others up, just as he had done for her. He can only stare in surprise, touched by her deep understanding and forgiveness. Nearby, Jean remains skeptical, questioning if the one who wields such volatile magic can truly be trusted, but she points toward him with unwavering confidence, confirming that he was the one who saved her during her pilgrimage. She beams with a radiant smile, her voice filled with genuine warmth as she describes Haru as both incredibly kind and dependable. Beside her, the young man can only stare in stunned silence, his cheeks flushing at the unexpected praise. Continuing her heartfelt confession, she explains that simply thinking of him brings her a sense of happiness that makes her heart race with a pleasant warmth. He remains frozen, his face deepening into a dark crimson as the weight of her words sinks in. With a joyful exclamation, she declares her profound respect for him, her eyes sparkling with admiration. He struggles to process the sentiment, sensing that her feelings might be something more complex than mere respect, yet he remains silent. Unaware of his inner turmoil, she vows that once she ascends to the rank of a true saintess, she will strive to bring happiness to everyone, just as he has done for her. She encourages him to cherish the bond they share, offering a gentle smile that leaves him looking thoughtful and slightly bewildered. Nearby, his companions cannot help but comment on the display. The small, horned girl teases him for being a sinful man who breaks hearts without realizing it, while the maid bluntly notes that despite his monstrous magical talent, he is utterly hopeless in matters of the heart. He can only stammer in protest, overwhelmed by their combined scrutiny. Later, within the formal confines of a meeting hall, Jean confers with a high-ranking official regarding the recent unrest. They identify Meliera Yerkal, the ruler of Azrael, as the mastermind behind the recent events, a revelation that casts a grim shadow over the room. The official elaborates on the situation, noting that since Meliera's ascension, trade with Orlando has been abruptly severed for reasons unknown. Listening intently, the young girl's expression turns to one of deep concern as she hears the woman described as a cold-hearted tyrant. Seeking a way to resolve the growing crisis, the young man turns to the maid to inquire about the distance to the neighboring territory. She informs him that a journey to Azrael would take approximately a week by carriage. With a look of grim determination, he announces his intention to travel to Azrael himself. He is driven by a need to understand the truth behind the conflict and the motivations of the woman who has thrown their world into such turmoil. Haru is taken aback as his companions suddenly announce their intentions to join him. Sana, Nine, and Letitia stand united, their resolve catching him completely off guard as they declare they will be ready whenever he is. He stammers, questioning their sudden readiness for such a perilous journey into dangerous territory, but Letitia quickly turns the tables. She demands to know why he ever entertained the thought of venturing out on his own, forcing him into a defensive silence. Looking down, he confesses his fear of bringing more misfortune to those around him, recalling the injuries others sustained because of his previous plans. His self-reflection is abruptly interrupted when Letitia reaches out and firmly pinches his cheeks, pulling at his face to snap him out of his guilt. She continues to pull at his face, her expression fierce as she berates him for his constant habit of shouldering all the blame. This tendency to isolate himself and take responsibility for everything, she insists, is precisely why they must stick together as a team. Softening her tone slightly, she reminds him that the true fault lies with the criminal who instigated the conflict, not with him. Haru's gaze drifts toward Ange, his heart heavy with the shared burden of their recent trials, yet he finds himself agreeing with Letitia's perspective. Nearby, Ange is locked in a spirited debate with her father. She refuses to stay behind while Haru seeks the truth, asserting her desire to contribute as both a saintess and the Lord's daughter, even offering her burgeoning healing magic as proof that she can be of use on the pilgrimage. Her father, the bearded official, eventually relents, entrusting his daughter's safety to Haru. He acknowledges Haru not just as a comrade, but as the only person he can truly trust to protect her, a sentiment that brings a rare smile of approval to Nine's face. Soon after, the group prepares for departure at the city gates. Ange stands at the center, now clad in ornate, ceremonial priestess robes that signify her official status, as the others look on with a mix of excitement and determination for the road ahead. Before they set off, Ange takes a moment to bid a quiet farewell to a companion. She offers words of reassurance, explaining that while she wished to stay, this journey is something she must undertake for the sake of those who have shown her kindness and forgiven her past. Looking back one last time, her eyes are filled with a new sense of purpose. She vows to continue her duties as a priestess, driven by the forgiveness and support she has received from Haru and the others, ready to face whatever challenges the pilgrimage may bring. She smiles warmly, expressing her deep affection for Haru and her resolve to do her best as his true friend. Haru reciprocates the sentiment, and soon, the the group boards a horse-drawn carriage, beginning their journey away from the familiar walls of the church. As the carriage rolls forward, a silent prayer is offered to the Lord, seeking divine protection for the travelers on the road ahead. Inside the carriage, Letitia watches the others with a soft expression, noting how relieved she is that Haru and Sana have finally reconciled. 9 agrees, her usual stoic demeanor softening slightly at the sight of their restored bond, while Ange beams with joy at the group's unity. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, he remains lost in thought, prompting Sana to ask what is troubling him. He struggles to articulate his unease, but their conversation shifts to the mysterious Meliera, wondering what kind of person the Lord of Azrael truly is and what to expect upon their arrival. Far behind them, a heavy stone door, choked by ancient roots, slams shut with a resounding thud, sealing away a secret the group has seemingly forgot. Suddenly, the stone structure erupts as she bursts through the debris, gasping for air and trembling with rage. She curses Haru's name, incensed that he had the audacity to lock her away in such a moldy, forgotten place while he went off on his journey. She feels her stomach growl loudly, reminding her of her immediate needs, but her hunger only fuels her spite. She vows to find Haru, beat him senseless, and lock him up as retribution for his betrayal, promising that punishment will follow her meal. Miles away, he feels a sudden chill, a premonition that something is terribly wrong. His own stomach growls in an uncanny echo of the woman he left behind, though he dismisses the sensation as mere hunger and continues his quiet contemplation. The disheveled warrior is soon approached by a woman of noble bearing, whose gaze is fixed on the legendary figure before her. She addresses the blonde woman with reverence, identifying her as the sword princess hero, Platinus-sama, and marveling at her fearsome presence. She looks up, her brow furrowed in confusion as she stares at the stranger. Still catching her breath and clearly irritated, she demands to know who the woman is and what she wants with her. She offers a polite, yet chilling smile, acknowledging her own lack of manners for not having introduced herself yet. She formally introduces herself as Meliera Yerkal, expressing a cold pleasure in finally making an acquaintance. Elsewhere, at the stone fortress, the guards begin their shift change, confirming that everything remains quiet and undisturbed in the depths below. One of the men stationed there, a rugged fellow with a sharp goatee, casually greets a silent observer lurking in the shadows. He questions the hooded figure, wondering if they had been watching from nearby the entire time, far earlier than he had anticipated. Receiving no answer, he turns to leave, grumbling about the cunning nature of his employer and the streak of bad luck that led him to take such a job. He offers a final piece of advice, suggesting it might be best for the hooded youth to flee as well, but the figure sharply rejects the comparison, demanding not to be grouped with the likes of him. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by a spray of crimson as a lethal strike finds its mark, the hooded figure caught in a violent upheaval. The commotion draws the attention of a nearby sentry, who calls for silence only to stumble upon a grisly trail of blood staining the stone floor. His cries of alarm echo through the courtyard as he announces the unthinkable. The prisoner has vanished, leaving only chaos in their wake. As the alarm's frantic tolling filled the prison, a young girl stood in the quiet distance, far from the reach of the guards. With a smear of fresh blood across her cheek, she adjusted her dark scarf, her expression chillingly vacant. One objective had been met, but her mission was far from over. Her thoughts turned toward her next target, the elimination of the one known as Haru, the traitor. The carriage driver apologizes for the drop-off point, explaining that an honest man wouldn't want to get any closer to the town. Lona and his companions, Letitia, Sana, and Nine, thank him as they prepare to continue on foot, mindful of the warning. Ahead of them lies the labyrinth city, Azrael, a place of legend and danger that looms in the distance. The city itself is a sprawling metropolis perched precariously atop a massive, jagged peak, its lights flickering against the dark silhouette of the mountain under a vast sky. He stares in disbelief as Letitia clarifies that the city isn't just a labyrinth, it is built directly over a massive dungeon. The scale of the place is far more imposing than he had imagined, leaving him momentarily stunned. She elaborates on the unique geography, noting that while the upper levels are manageable for beginners, the depths become increasingly perilous. The city was strategically constructed right on top of this subterranean maze to facilitate exploration. Continuing her history lesson, she explains how Azrael's first lord was fascinated by the dungeon, drawing in adventurers who sought the jewels and rare materials within. This influx of wealth and people caused the city to flourish into a bustling hub of life. However, the current reality is grim. She notes that the oppressive rule has ruined the local economy, with inns and shops overcharging while the guild fails to maintain order. He can only agree, sensing the heavy tension that has settled over the region. He finds the situation suspicious, noting that while a greedy politician might try to invade a place like Orlando, the methods being used here are bizarre. Letitia suggests they gather more information from the locals, a plan Sana enthusiastically supports as they prepare to enter the city. Despite their plan, a sense of dread washes over him, an intuition that something is deeply wrong. Meanwhile, in a lavishly decorated hall far from the dusty road, the atmosphere is far more refined but no less tense. Meliera Yerkal, the Lord of Azrael, sits at a table laden with fine food, her expression cold as she admits that her life is being targeted. She calmly requests protection, acknowledging the trouble she finds herself in as she sips her wine. She watches as the young woman she addressed as a hero indulges in a lavish feast, the table overflowing with roasted meats and fine dishes provided by the city's treasury. The warrior continues to eat with a detached, almost sullen expression, seemingly unimpressed by the opulence surrounding her or the gravity of her host's presence. She eventually pauses, clutching her utensils with clear irritation as she flatly refuses to cooperate, claiming she is far too busy with her meal to entertain any requests for aid. When the lord of the city suggests she take initiative, the hero counters sharply, pointing out that since she was brought here through complex transportation magic, her host should be more than capable of handling matters alone. She pushes her plate away with a grimace, complaining that the food lacks flavor, prompting a calm offer from the other woman to provide something more suitable to her palate. The noblewoman maintains a cryptic smile, suggesting that the emptiness the warrior feels is not a simple craving for food, but something far deeper and more significant than ordinary hunger. This cryptic remark leaves the hero visibly confused, her brow furrowing as she demands an explanation for such strange and unsettling words. She responds with a proposition, promising to reveal the truth behind that hunger only if the warrior agrees to lend her strength to the city's cause. Unmoved by the offer, the warrior turns her back and begins to walk away, declaring her intention to return home rather than become a pawn in another's political game. Despite the hero's firm refusal, the Lord of Azrael calls out once more, urging her to reconsider the reward that awaits should she choose to provide the protection the city so desperately needs. She leans in with a knowing smile, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she offers a deal that strikes at the very heart of the warrior's motivations. The Lord of Azrael suggests she can teach the girl how to safeguard her most precious childhood friend, a proposal that leaves the young woman frozen in disbelief. Suddenly, she slams her palm onto the table, the sharp crack echoing through the room as she demands the girl not underestimate the weight of her own reputation. The sudden outburst leaves the sword princess trembling, her composure shattered by the older woman's piercing insight. Because of this display of power, she continues her psychological assault, recounting the strange history of the world's youngest hero and the supposedly weak wizard who has remained by her side. With a chillingly calm smile, she points out the inherent absurdity of a level 7 mage surviving in such a high-level party, suggesting there is a deeper, more dangerous truth hidden in plain sight. Her words hit home, causing the young warrior's breath to hitch as she realizes her deepest secrets are being laid bare. The Lord of Azrael presses the advantage, questioning the depth of the girl's devotion to the boy she holds so dear. As the weight of the revelation sinks in, a dark vision of the boy's potential future manifests, a figure wreathed in chaotic, black energy. She voices the girl's unspoken fear that his overwhelming magical power is not a gift, but a ticking time bomb that will eventually consume him and everything he touches. In response to the girl's mounting horror, she simply chuckles, dismissing her terrifying perceptiveness as a mere talent for reading the desires of others. The sword princess, now gripped by a mixture of terror and fury, reaches for her blade, demanding to know the true identity of the woman who seems to know her soul better than she knows herself. The group stands in the middle of a bustling thoroughfare in the town of Crimson Fong, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon them. The locals whisper, wondering what business these strangely dressed adventurers have in their midst. Sensing the unwanted attention, they decide it is best to divide their numbers to blend in more effectively. Haru suggests splitting into two groups, a plan Letitia agrees is for the best, though she notes how much they currently stand out. She is immediately interrupted by Sana, who lunges forward to pull the young Ange into a tight, playful embrace. Sana declares her intention to stick with the girl and Nine, warning Haru that he must keep a close watch on them or risk getting into trouble. He gently pushes the energetic demon girl back, insisting that she accompany Nine instead. To sweeten the deal, he promises that Nine will provide her with plenty of tasty treats, a bribe that leaves Sana conflicted as she weighs her love for him against her appetite. They watch as the trio departs, leaving the two of them alone in the street. Letitia turns to her companion, ready to begin their part of the investigation now that the others have gone their separate way. She remains silent for a moment, her gaze lingering on the path their friends took. A quiet affirmation escapes her lips, her expression unreadable as she processes the sudden change in group dynamic. Meanwhile, as she fades from view, the others walk through a different part of town. Nine observes her companion with a hint of surprise, remarking on how unexpectedly thoughtful the demon girl is being, though Sana quickly brushes off the compliment. She explains that her concern stems from the way Letitia has been acting lately. Her sharp eyes narrow as she reflects on the subtle shifts in the warrior's behavior that others might have missed during their journey. While she reflects on this, the pair continues their trek, but the atmosphere between them is heavy. It felt as if Letitia had spent the entire journey struggling to find the words to tell her master something important, only to give up in the end. Despite their silence, the horned girl concludes that it is unwise to harbor pent-up feelings. She knows they may soon find themselves facing dangerous adversaries, and the weight of the coming conflict demands clarity of mind and heart. The group wanders through the eerily quiet streets of the town, finding no one to provide the information they seek. Nine suggests they return to the main road, while Haru silently hopes that she and Alice can eventually have a proper conversation, eventually turning to Alice to ask for her thoughts on the deserted surroundings. Before she can offer an opinion, a sudden, sharp crack echoes through the air, drawing their immediate attention. Both Haru and Alice are caught off guard by the noise, their faces etched with surprise as they look toward the source of the disturbance. In a nearby alleyway, a masked official and his subordinates have cornered a local man, demanding an arbitrary toll for passage. The victim protests, confused by the sudden demand, but his pleas are met only with the mocking laughter of the captain's men. He remains cold and indifferent to the man's fear, drawing his sword with a menacing flourish. As the townsperson cowers, the captain declares that anyone interfering with an official on duty will face the consequences, his blade poised to strike. Just as the blow is about to land, Haru interposes himself, summoning a series of glowing, geometric barriers to intercept the blade. He quickly checks on the terrified man, who is left speechless by the youth's sudden and heroic intervention. The captain, enraged by the interference, sneers at Haru and labels him a meddling adventurer who doesn't know his place. Without hesitation, he lunges forward with a triple slash, his sword becoming a blur of lethal energy aimed directly at the boy. He is stunned to see his advanced technique effortlessly repelled by what appears to be a simple, beginner-level defense spell. The glowing runes of Haru's shield hold firm, leaving the official to mutter in disbelief at the unexpected strength of the barrier. Recognizing that the situation has escalated beyond a simple shakedown, the masked man pauses to reassess his opponent. He realizes that Haru is no ordinary traveler, especially after witnessing the boy withstand a high-level sword skill with such composure. He decides to withdraw for now, sheathing his weapon while vowing to remember Haru's face for a future encounter. As the officials depart, Alice and Nine rush to Haru's side, their concern evident as they fuss over him and try to process the chaotic turn of events. They eventually gather their bearings in front of a local establishment, where the gravity of the situation begins to sink in. Alice looks at Haru with a mixture of worry and urgency, asking if he truly understands the danger posed by the Crimson Fawn group they just defied. The young girl, Misha, rushes into her father's arms, her voice filled with relief as she calls out to him. Behind them, the weary travelers stand in the entryway of a modest establishment, questioning if they have finally found a place of rest. He pulls his daughter close, expressing his deep gratitude for her safe return. However, his expression quickly turns somber as he explains that while they are on the outskirts of Azrael, his business is currently closed to outsiders. He warns them that for their own safety, they should depart from the city as quickly as possible. Because of the growing corruption within the city, he reveals the dark truth about the Crimson Fawn. This public order squad, supposedly under the Lord's direct supervision, has become a law unto itself, terrorizing the populace with arbitrary punishments and unjust imprisonments. The man continues his grim warning, identifying the leader of this group as Cineas Zamazun, the same masked figure they encountered earlier. He describes Cineas as a bloodthirsty combatant who seeks out and eliminates any adventurer he deems capable, leaving a trail of bodies in his way. Hearing this, the young mage turns to his companion with a look of mounting concern, wondering if his earlier intervention has inadvertently placed them in even greater peril. Despite the danger, they cannot simply flee, as their mission requires them to remain within the borders of Azrael. In response to their predicament, the innkeeper's stern demeanor softens with a sense of debt. He insists that as a token of his gratitude for saving his daughter, they should stay at his inn, acknowledging that they must have their own pressing reasons for remaining in such a volatile place. The little girl chimes in with youthful bluntness, urging them to stay and dismissing the other inns in the city as nothing more than overpriced traps. Her father laughs, welcoming the rest of their group and assuring them that there is plenty of room for everyone. Later that evening, the two companions sit by a crackling fire under the starlit sky, reflecting on the day's events. While the boy feels a sense of relief at having secured a safe haven, he remains wary of the potential danger their presence might bring to the kind innkeeper and his daughter. As the silence stretches between them, the warrior woman suddenly reaches out, her fingers trembling as she grips his sleeve. Her head is bowed, her eyes hidden in shadow, radiating a sudden and heavy melancholy that catches him off guard. She finally speaks, her voice a low whisper as she poses a question that strikes at the heart of their journey. She asks him what he would do if there were a way to restore her original personality, leaving him stunned by the weight of her words and the vulnerability she has finally revealed. She sits beside him on the cold stone of the well, her question hanging heavy in the night air. Stunned by the sudden weight of her words, he can only stammer in confusion, pressing her to explain what she could possibly mean by returning to a former self. His mind reels as a fragment of a memory, or perhaps a vision of what once was flickers into existence. A younger version of the girl, her eyes wide with an innocent startle, appears before a shadowed figure draped in a heavy cloak. The name, Alice, echoes like a ghost from a time long forgotten, bridging the gap between the woman sitting before him and the child she used to be. The young woman stood silently as her master's voice lashed out, calling her a talentless fool for her disobedience. Haru watched from the side, his young mind unable to grasp that anything was truly wrong at the time. A decade had passed since those simpler, if harsher days. While time and experience naturally change a person, the shift in her was far more profound than mere maturity. But her current state was utterly abnormal, a twisted version of the girl who once smiled. If her every action was truly meant to protect Haru, then the path she had chosen made no logical sense, suggesting a deeper corruption of her will. He questioned the meaning of her words, looking toward the dark, rustling leaves of the forest as he sought to understand the true nature of Alice's transformation. They stood together in the quiet of the woods as Jean questioned Nine about the possibility of restoring the woman to her former self. Nine explained her grim theory, that false memories had been systematically planted in her mind, warping her very perception of reality. She proposed a chilling theory, wondering if she had been subjected to a magical suggestion similar to the one that had once bound Lona. It was a subtle, insidious form of control that could rewrite a person's soul from within. Though she hadn't known the woman before her change, she refused to believe that such a drastic transformation could be natural. The words of this current version of her felt hollow, like a script written by another. They reached a grim conclusion under the shade of the great tree. The only way forward was to find a method to clear the magical suggestion clouding her mind and return her to who she was meant to be. He began to piece together the timeline, noting that her behavior had shifted drastically 5 years ago. He wondered if Meliera had been pulling the strings from the shadows for all that time, watching their every move. She considered the broader implications of his realization, wondering if there were other masters of such manipulation lurking in the world, capable of weaving such complex suggestions into the minds of the unsuspecting. Letitia looks at Lona with wide, searching eyes, asking if he truly believes her. He responds without hesitation, assuring her that he wouldn't take her words lightly, as he knows she wouldn't speak so carelessly. Because of his earnest reply, she suddenly breaks down, her face flushing as she tries to hide her tears. He is caught off guard by her sudden emotional outburst, stammering in confusion as he tries to understand what he said to cause such a reaction. Their moment is abruptly interrupted by a sudden crash from above. A small figure tumbles through the air and lands heavily on the ground before them, leaving them both staring in shock at the unexpected arrival of a stranger who seems to have fallen from the sky. As they rush to check on the fallen stranger, Sana and Nine finally catch up, only to find a young girl lying there. Instead of a cry of pain, the child lets out a low, rumbling growl from her stomach, weakly muttering that she is starving and needs food immediately. Moments later, the mysterious girl is seated and devouring a large piece of meat with animalistic intensity. She ignores everything around her, focused entirely on sating her ravenous hunger with messy, frantic bites. While she continues to eat, Lona introduces himself, though he is clearly bewildered by her presence, and asks if she has any companions. The innkeeper arrives with another plate, commenting on the girl's impressive appetite as the group watches her in stunned silence. After finishing a significant portion of the meal, she finally speaks, identifying herself as Silpha Clobrast. She states firmly that she has no companions and always operates entirely on her own, rejecting the idea of needing anyone else. She looks up with a cold, detached gaze, warning them not to get in her way while she decides her next move. Lona can only offer a polite thanks for her allowing them to provide the meal, though she remains focused on her own internal calculations. With her hunger satisfied, she abruptly stands and heads toward the backyard, seeking a quiet place to think. The innkeeper remarks on her being a strange child, while Lona wonders aloud if she might be an adventurer, though her behavior suggests something else. He remains deep in thought, fixating on her specific choice of words. It strikes him as odd that she said she acts alone rather than travels alone, a distinction that hints at a much more dangerous and professional nature than a simple wanderer. She sits alone on the wooden steps, her mind heavy with the grim task ahead. Haru is a traitor, the next name on her list after Jean Dainsleif. Yet a seed of doubt lingers as she contemplates the necessity of his death. Looking closer at her target's life, she realizes this is the first time she has truly observed him as a person rather than a mark, a realization that complicates her cold resolve. The weight of the situation looms over the city of Azrael like a dark, jagged shadow. She knows that if her magic doesn't strike him down instantly, the consequences of failure in such a dangerous place could be lethal. Her journey has been long and arduous, having shadowed their carriage relentlessly since they left Orlando, waiting for a single moment of vulnerability that never seemed to materialize. Every time she looked, he was surrounded by allies, Letitia, Sana, and the others, making it clear that the boy is never truly alone, protected by a bond she cannot easily penetrate. The toll of the pursuit has been high. She is exhausted and famished, having nearly collapsed from hunger during the trek to Azrael. And worse, she has allowed him to see her face, compromising her anonymity. Now, she kneels before the glowing orb of her master's communication, reporting that the man known as Haru is indeed a formidable and dangerous individual who will not be easily dispatched. Her master, the Lord of Azrael, confirms the necessity of the kill, noting that Jean's betrayal makes the elimination of the boy a matter of absolute fact and political necessity. With a gaze that is both demanding and expectant, the woman places the weight of the mission solely on her shoulders, claiming to depend entirely on her success to maintain order. As the young assassin bites into her meager rations, the fear of failure tastes more bitter than the food. She cannot afford to be hated by her master and resolves to finish the job at any cost. She stares in wide-eyed shock as a stray cat brazenly helps itself to her meal, its small mouth working quickly through the scraps. She frantically waves her hands, trying to discourage the feline intruder with a firm refusal, while a companion calls out for the animal to leave her dinner alone. Finally, she resorts to picking the stubborn creature up by its midsection, hoisting it away from the bowl as it lets out a long, protesting cry. Jean provides a grim update on the state of Azrael, noting that public order has steadily declined since Meliera took command. He mentions that the situation is far worse than anticipated, with the Crimson Fang's involvement adding another layer of complexity to their mission. The youth is visibly shaken by the suggestion that a ruler would intentionally destabilize her own city. Jean explains his theory. Meliera is likely fanning civilian anxieties to incite a controlled rebellion, a tactic strikingly similar to the chaos orchestrated during the fake Saintus incident. Letitia joins the conversation, agreeing that regardless of the specific motive, Meliera's actions are clearly malevolent. She points out that the information they just gathered from the local innkeeper confirms the growing unrest among the populace. The innkeeper himself looks on with a heavy heart, his expression etched with the weariness of a man watching his home crumble. While he lacks the political insight of the others, the mere mention of Milyera's name seems to weigh heavily upon him. He recounts the suspicious history of the current regime, starting with the sudden death of the previous lord. In the aftermath, every individual next in the line of succession perished in a series of convenient accidents or sudden illnesses, clearing a path for a distant relative. With all other heirs eliminated, Milyera ascended to the throne. Her rise to power was as swift as it was bloody, leaving her as the undisputed, if feared, Lord of Azrael. The man continues his tale of woe, explaining how she immediately raised taxes to exorbitant levels. When the desperate citizens attempted to petition her for relief, they were turned away at the castle gates, told they could not see the Lord without providing a significant gift. While Sana impulsively suggests simply battering their way past the guards, Letitia remains thoughtful. She realizes that if they want a formal audience to investigate further, they must play by the city's new, corrupt rules and procure an offering. Haru remains cautious, reminding the group that they lack concrete proof of Milyera's involvement in the previous conspiracy. Without evidence, acting too boldly could result in bounties being placed on their heads, turning them into fugitives based on nothing but Jean's word. He then proposes a solution that satisfies both their need for a gift and their desire for action. They will descend into the dungeon located directly beneath Azrael. If they can find a rare treasure within its depths, they will have the perfect offering to gain entry to the castle. He reassures the skeptical demon girl that everything will be fine, even as she questions if the dungeon hasn't already been picked clean by previous explorers. Because of her greed for riches, she becomes instantly energized, her eyes sparkling at the mention of a fountain of wealth. He explains the unique nature of Azrael's dungeon, noting that its ever-shifting layout ensures a constant supply of both monsters and treasures for those brave enough to enter. With the plan for the following day solidified, the group decides to retire for the evening, their voices echoing through the quiet hallways as they exchange final goodnights. He finds himself tossing and turning, unable to find rest as his mind wanders back to his time traveling with Letitia. Back then, his role had been limited to menial chores, a far cry from the life of a true adventurer. This lack of experience weighed on him. Between his previous subservient role and the chaos surrounding the false saintess, he realized he had never truly lived the life of an explorer. Despite the danger ahead, a spark of genuine excitement flickers within him at the prospect of tomorrow's descent, though a sudden sound from the courtyard below breaks his concentration. Looking out from the balcony, he is surprised to see the young girl, Silpha, sitting alone in the moonlight. He quickly makes his way down to the porch, questioning why she has remained outside in the cold ever since their evening meal. She looks up at him with a sheepish expression, explaining that a stray cat had claimed her lap as a bed, and she simply couldn't bring herself to disturb its slumber. Just as she speaks, the feline finally stirs and leaps away, leaving her free to move at last while he watches the sudden departure with a look of mild bewilderment. He hands her a steaming mug, his eyes widening as he notices the pale, bluish tint of her lips. With a sudden sense of urgency, he beckons her closer, insisting she warm herself immediately. Having borrowed the inn's kitchen for a moment, he offers the cup of hot milk, explaining that the warmth will help her recover from the night's chill. He watches her intently, concerned by her physical state. She stares at the offering in confusion, questioning why he would go to such lengths for her. He pauses, taken aback by her bewilderment, before simply stating that he didn't want her to fall ill after her vigil. The realization hits her that he had been watching, aware that she had remained motionless in the cold just to avoid disturbing a sleeping animal. The depth of his observation leaves her momentarily stunned. He ponders his own motivations, feeling a strange sense of conflict, as if he were betraying some unspoken rule of self-preservation. Yet he reasons that since he brought her to this inn, her well-being is ultimately his responsibility. She presses him further, curious as to why he would extend such kindness when there is clearly nothing for him to gain from the gesture. He admits that while there may be no personal benefit, his actions remain unchanged. A self-deprecating laugh escapes him as he acknowledges his own soft-hearted nature. Yet he remains firm in his belief that someone as considerate as her shouldn't have to suffer for their kindness. He sees her as a kindred spirit in her own way. Deciding it is time to rest, he bids her goodnight and suggests she head to bed soon, adding that she can simply return his cloak in the morning. He turns to leave, the weight of the day finally catching up to him. As he retreats toward his room, he offers a final, friendly parting, inviting her to use his name, Haru. She remains behind in the quiet hallway, her expression unreadable as she watches his retreating figure. Alone in the shadows, her thoughts turn dark and cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth she was just shown. She laments her missed opportunity to strike him down, her deep-seated disdain for humanity resurfacing. While others struggle with their own inner demons, the Lord of Azrael looks down with a cold, mocking smile, her voice dripping with disdain as she muses on the inherent weaknesses of those she deems inferior. To her, they are nothing more than foolish, greedy creatures who never truly mature, perpetually chasing desires beyond their reach, a fundamental flaw that makes them easy prey for those of her station. Having asserted her superiority, she settles back into her ornate throne, looking down at the defeated form of the sword princess sprawled across the cold floor. Toying with a small token between her fingers, she ponders with chilling detachment exactly how she should amuse herself with her new, broken plaything, wondering what game would be most fitting for such a high-ranking captive.